This is the enterprise
So you
plan
just work
meeting.
from the left?
Yeah. And what I would like to do is to get everybody to introduce themselves, and we can start with Jennifer.
Jennifer Johnson.
Bill Jansen.
Dick Trey.
Tim Steele.
Lance Wilbur.
Paul Bowers.
Steve Buffalo.
Ann Henderson.
Cheryl Beckham.
Todd Cole, Sport Engineer.
Margaret C. from Hill.
Student. And you are? From where? Good.
I'm Brett Jokla from Anchor Water and Wastewater Utility.
Mark Johnston in L&B.
Terrence Pearson in L&B.
Mark Allman, IEC,
And back there at that table, Sharon.
Sharon Beasley, legislative.
All right, and we need to kind of keep moving because we're trying to bite up a big chunk here today. And Paul,
Be quick.
your first
Okay.
step.
Paul Bowers, airport manager, and this is going to have to come up here to slide it down. So, my understanding, you want an overview of the departments, and then a review of the budget and what we're doing out there. So, for those of you not familiar with Merrill Field, it's been here since 1930. It is a reliever for Ted Stevens. About a third of the airport is on a former landfill. So when you drive down Merrill Drive, those are not cross-east from hell, that's differential settling of the underlying trash mass. And that's going to be that way for a long time. The landfill was closed in '87, it'll be 100 years before that's out. So presently we have a 12,500 pound weight restriction on the airport, an air traffic control tower manned by the FAA. That's 7 a.m. to midnight, summers, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. otherwise. There are 40 plus businesses, 51 leaseholds, 19 rentals, and hundreds of land use permittees on field. Two of those businesses are fixed wing flight schools and two are rotorcraft flight schools. And we're one of the few airports in the country that actually have a taxiway that leads directly to a hospital emergency room. These are the hospitals. Give you an overview of what we're talking about. What I want to tell you today is noise complaints. We have noise at Merrill Field, always will. We have largely finessed that by setting up a helicopter operating protocol that basically has the aircraft land long, take off, and this ascent and descent at the steepest angle practical. Don't use the north-south runway unless the other options are not available. And we've actually set up a program at Bryant Airfield on J-Bear where folks can do their touch and goes for helicopters. That keeps the noise there instead of over Rogers Park, Fairview, and the other neighborhoods around Merrill Field. We have vehicle pedestrian deviations when folks are going out to the controlled surfaces, taxiway runways, without coordinating with the tower. That is partially a geographic constraint of Merrill Field. We don't have a separation between the apron edge and the taxiway, so effectively we have an apron edge taxi lane, and it's easier said than done to pay attention to that. We're better than we used to be. 2 years ago we were number 3 in the nation for that. We have moved out of the top 100, so that's a plus. We have set up quarterly meetings with the airport manager for any tenants, and that seems to work out pretty well. It's a great venue for folks to vent and express concerns. We have an ongoing bird control program. We sprayed for grasshoppers this year for the first time ever in Merrill Field. Last year there were so many grasshoppers that the pavement looked like it was moving, which of course is a smorgasbord for seagulls. We have lots and lots of seagulls. Of course, a lot of complaints from pilots. That was a problem. We now have virtually no grasshoppers, so it's worked out well. We're doing crack sealing airport-wide. We're doing a marketing program in concert with the MAC, that's the Municipal Airports Aviation Advisory Council Commission. And from a leasing perspective, I'll go through the multiple leases, then the projects, and our budget. The leasing these are the various ones, and basically they are spread around the field. If you have questions as to where they're at, that map comes up again. The significant one that's presently under construction is a state-of-art aircraft paint hangar that will take place. It's being built under construction right now. It's east of the tower, west of the old hangar.net building, now known as the Wings of Freedom hangar. That will be a 16,400 square foot facility, big enough to stick a DC-3-8 Saab 300 in to paint. It's being done by Chaz Limited, Chuck Miller, and this will be akin to the J.C. Penney anchor store in the mall. I think this will draw traffic from around Alaska, Western Canada, literally from down south, where people will be able to come up here, paint their bird, and play Turista for a week, go home and use the paint job. To give you an idea of the cost, right now, Danny Siebert with Penn Air, they paint their Saab 300s every other year at 100,000 pop. And they send them down south. And they make that up in 1 year in fuel savings because of the slipperier surface on the aircraft. It's a lot of money in aircraft painting. And this will do painting and fabric recovering of rag airplanes, fabric surface airplanes. Over here on the right is a proposed development. Alaska Airframes has bought out Reeve Aeromotive. They will be presenting a new lease, but they want to turn that into a super cub center of the world. Right now, they do about a third of their business in Alaska, a third internationally, a third in CONUS. They build superstructure, everything with the fuselage down. Struts, wheels, hubs, tires, etc. And right now they have 40 employees in Chugiak. They'll maintain their Chugiak facility and expand their manufacturing here in Anchorage. On the left side is the old WW2 era Quonset huts. His lease expired June 30. He has a new lease that has very strict covenants in it as to his performance. Those 3 buildings will be raised by October 1, and below that, on the left side, there's 2 parallel buildings. He's required to build the first one within 1 year after October 1, the second one 2 years thereafter. And if he fails to do that, he will lose his lease. So I think it's an incentive for him to act. On the right side is Alaska Aircraft Engine. They are building on the left side. This is their existing building. They're going to build a building here that's 14,400 feet, and that will be a hangar on that end going out toward the taxiway. This is north, and then 4 individual hangars on that side. They thought they'd have it under construction. Now they're still waiting a building permit. On the left side of the field, on the west side of the field, along Orchid Street, the Janssen hangars, they've completed 9 units. There's 2 separate buildings, 5 along Orchid Street, 4 on the east side toward runway 34. Those are condominiumized 2,000 square foot units for sale. Anybody interested in the hangar, they're a mere $299,000 each. On the right side is Jayhawk Helicopters. They are going to be building or constructing a hangar large enough to handle 2 A-Star helicopters. They will be starting soon. They are also awaiting a permit. Anybody have questions as to where they're at? Good. Project updates. What we've got are several projects. Phase 3 is security improvements, and then the dynamic compaction, airport master plan, re-roofing, city electric acquisition, and future projects. This is on the northeast side of the east-west runway. That's taxiway Kilo, and essentially that is almost 3 times wider than we need. It's 350 feet wide, 100 feet is adequate. We are necking that down so that it will mirror the south side by the UAA Aviation Technology Division. That is a real exercise for snow removal, and when we've only got 4 guys 7 days a week. There are many days there's one guy out there. So if we don't get it done and somebody runs into it, if we don't have it on a NOTAM, a notice to airmen, it effectively makes an attractive nuisance, a snare for people to run into. And if we don't have all of their I's dotted and T's crossed, that's a liability for the city. We're going to install fiber optic cable on the north side of the field, parallel with Fifth Avenue on the south side of that fence. The fence will be reconfigured as it sits. It's pretty handy to climb over the top. That contributes to our VPDs. In the upper right side, in the middle of that, the Fifth Avenue fencing detail, basically it'll have a curved arc out, similar to what's at the base of the tower now. That project is about $4.8 million. They are going to start, I think, should be next month. And that's funded 93.75% by the FAA, and 1/2 of the sponsor share of the 6.25% is picked up by the state, which coincidentally was the program I set up when I was the state recreation director. It's working out real well for us. Dynamic compaction, number 2 up there is the dynamic compaction of the underlying trash mast, and that is quite the program. They just finished that, but that should come up. And this is dropping a 15-ton weight from 70 feet. You drop it in the same hole 4 times, that buries that weight, which is about 4.5 feet tall. Pull it out, refill that hole, and do it again. And that will compress the underlying trash mass 6 to 10 feet, which in turn reduces the methane gas production and the water and air content. It will never get rid of all of it, but it makes a stable platform so we don't have these undulating pavement surfaces. The airport master plan has not been updated in 14 years. It was well overdue. It's now underway. We are redoing the roof on Orchard Street on 3 rental buildings, and that should have been done by now, but we ended up having to do a code-compliant electrical feed rework. And the other significant item is city electric property, the 6 acres on Orchard Street. That was identified in the airport master plan for airport acquisition. We are well underway on that. Actually, that's coming up for the Assembly's action. It's going to be introduced next Tuesday, and the ordinance for consideration is on the 28th. That is funded 95% by AIP. It's a good program for the airport on a long-term basis. There's one other property, the Telcom business on Orchard Street. These were all done under a willing seller, willing buyer arrangement, and with full support of the FAA. Future projects, we're going to be doing dynamic compaction phases 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, however many it takes to finish that area on both sides of Quebec. And that will in turn, it's an expensive process. It works well for the trash compaction underneath, but it's going to be years before we ever get it done. Millfield Drive needs reconstruction. Runway 523 needs lighting.
With the gas from the landfill, have we ever looked into clearing it off or capturing it?
There's many times. The longer there's enough to be a nuisance, not enough to be a production. And as the trash mass gets older, there's less produced. We have a flare hut that needs to be relit. So it's just enough to be a nuisance. And the nuisance is if you, on the construction, you have to accommodate any below ground electrical. They'll have to be sealed. Otherwise, you end up with a potential seepage in the building and explosion problem. Just enough to be a real nuisance. So the budget, what we've got, the significant items in the budget, we've got a pretty small operation. The significant items, we continue to operate in black with our general tax support. We are looking to add a staffer, and that's a From the succession planning point of view, our office manager, Darlene Sevier, and the leasing specialist, Linda Lukey. Darlene's been there for 23 years. Linda is 22 years. From our office staff, we have Pat McCormick, our finance guy, Alex Jemias, her assistant, and myself. That's it. We have 4 maintenance guys, so it's a pretty skinny staff. And if those 2 leave, both retiring likely in 2 years, we are just completely screwed if we don't have somebody that has any idea what's going on. The lease rates remain the same for 15, and our tie-down rates, we're likely looking at a couple $1 million next year for AIP. That could go up or down depending on FAA large yes. An overview, those handouts, by the way, that you have, provide significant detail as to what the budget is. This is an overview of actual 14 at 1.6. Our budget for 15 is 1.6. Our pro forma, as in projected for 15, is 1.68. And our proposed for 16 is 1.67. Lesser expenses at 1.4, 1.3, 1.4, and the projection for 16 is 1.65. It's noteworthy that the above expenses include a couple things that don't fit the standard MOA format. And that is an operating reserve of 5% of our revenue streams and a capital improvement sponsor share. Right now, 6.25% of our capital improvements are funded through the AIP program, the Airport Improvement Program for the state. I'm sorry, for the FAA. As I said, when I used to be the statewide aviation director, I set up a program where the state picks up 1/2 of our share. There's a distinct possibility, high probability, that's going to go away. And as a result, we have to pick up 6.25%. And if we do $2 million next year, that'd be $125,000. Bottom line, that makes a net income of $200,000 in 14, $268,000. 15 was budgeted. It's likely going to be $232,000, and the proposed for 16 drops by, coincidentally, $200,000 because of the $125,000 in sponsor share and $75,000 for the staff person. This, by the way, is the $232,000 is up from $208,000 because we had pretty minimal operating cost last year from the forward when we saved about $30,000. The way what we
let me take a quick break here and see if there are any questions on that financial aspect. Okay. Is there any risk? Well, we're not sure there's risk. You get a substantial share from the Fed, FAA, and state of your revenue, of your funding.
Well, yes, that funding, by the way, is only for capital improvement, not for operations. So all of the revenue stream to operate the airport comes from rentals and leases. There are no landing fees. Most of the aircraft there will, the maximum is $12,500. If you look at a nominal $2 per thousand landing fee, which is typical of what you find at most air carrier airports, typical 737 is 120,000 pounds. So you've got a $220 bill for a 737. Apply $2 per 1,000 pounds to an 800-pound aircraft. You're tripping over dimes to pick up pennies. It's just not correct.
Do you have tie-down, vacant tie-down slots?
We have about 75% occupancy on our tie-downs, and that's been fairly consistent. The only wait list we have is for power served or have electrical service for drive-thrus. We're building 9 more of those this summer, but that's the only wait list we have. We presently are the most expensive airport in South Central as far as our tie-down fees. Anchorage International is going to increase their rates and they will meet or exceed ours if they didn't, as per John Parrott from Anchorage. He said, I don't want to do it until we have the master plan telling us we have to do it.
There's a lot of aircraft over there. Okay, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this question is not just relative to Merrill Field, but probably all departments. Are the IGCs going to be based on a 3-year average or how?
Typically, IGC's around 5 years.
It's 5 years? Okay. I knew it was an average, but thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the way we do our annual lease rates, historically, the city has, the airport, has gone back in arrears and done a multi-year in arrear arrangement. You don't adjust it for 8 or 10, 5, 10, 12 years, and then you hit the tenants up with a significant increase to catch up. That's, to me, is not fair to either the operator or the lessee. But we started in 2014. I started at the airport March of 13. I've been running airports for 30 plus years without my field. What we did is took the CPI, the Consumer Price Index for year 1, projected that to year 2, and then that was our rate increase. If it turned out that year 2 was high, then we reduced it for the following year, or we increased it depending on what it was. So that's worked out well. Applying that increase for 2016 yielded a 0.2 cent increase. That would be far more cost inefficient than cost beneficial to implement that. If we're not increasing it by at least a penny, then we're not going to do it. So anyway, as a result, we're keeping our lease rates the same. As I said, our tie-down rates are higher now. We want to keep our tie-down rates as low as we can, even reduce them to make our field more competitive with our competing airports. The staff position is the service administrator. That's a guesstimated $75 including benefits cost per year, and we hire 3 summer temps contingent on how we come up for the cost for winter ops. If we don't have the money, we don't hire. IGCs are, if you'll know, are allocated by the departments for the services they provide, and they're set by OMB, as Lance just noted. As I noted, these are not standard MOA budget items, the operating reserve and the capital improvement sponsor share. That shows a pretty realistic picture of the airport. The way OMB addresses it historically is our capital improvement dollars. We're getting $4.8 million from FAA for a project this year, for one project, and $1 million for another. It's not bad considering we are allocated $1 million a year. But that shows as our revenue for this year, and then if we expend it next year, those expenses show as expenses. So if you look at the way OMB does it per GAAP, our revenue stream is +4, -2, +3, -6. It's not a realistic picture. So what you see here is realistic condition, what it is. And for this year, we're first time doing the 2016 budget with a capital improvement sponsor share, and that is to address the contingency that the state won't pick up the sponsor share. All that money stays at Merrill Field, so it's not like it's usurped or it goes away. And we don't have a debt or non-operating expense or non-budgeted, and that's where we do the budget. If you'd like to go through the details, that's set forth in that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you giving your presentation now?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I want to go back to the airport noise, and I just want to take a moment to publicly thank Paul, because he's been working with Chairman Train and I for probably 2 years, as long as he's been the director with airport noise in Rogers Park, and dealing with some very nice but PETA constituents. And he's done a really, really great job working with us and with them, and that's why one of the reasons why the policy is in place, helicopter training. So I just wanted to publicly thankful for this pleasant release. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Paul, how do you work with the community or with the tenants? Do you have tenant meetings, or how do you communicate and get feedback and so on and so forth?
I have an open door policy. Anybody has an issue, I'm always available. My personal cell phone is on my business card. We have quarterly meetings that have started, and we have a MAC, Municipal Airports Aviation Advisory Council Commission meeting, which coincidentally is today. And they are open forums. There's lots of opportunities. And I've worked very closely with various tenants trying to build projects out there. And going through the building permitting process is a bit of a maze for some folks. I'm not suggesting it's not a requisite maze, but it is a maze. So I've gone to those meetings with them. I've gone in lieu of them. I've met with the DEC to resolve issues. I think I've got an excellent relationship with every tenant I build. The only potential one is the one that's going to be evicted if he does it before to his contract. But they all know that ahead of time, and for implementing lease changes, the rates, we actually advise them in September or August what their proposed rate will be. That's presumptive on our part because it is before the Assembly passes the budget. On the other hand, if we don't implement it, no one's going to complain because we reduced it. But it sure makes it difficult for them to budget for the following year when they don't know about it until December. So far, nobody likes rate increases, but they've been very receptive to the process we go through and an explanation of how we get there.
Other questions? Thank you. Very informative, and I'm sure after I go through all this material, I'll give you a call and chat a little bit too.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
May I have a little PowerPoint as well? Is that your stick?
That's my stick.
Okay.
It's been a while since we've had you, so I appreciate your.
Well, we're always happy to take an opportunity to tell our story and to help you guys understand our business. So thanks for having us down today. Let's see, I'll go this way. Pretty much the same set of topics as Paul went through, perhaps in a little bit different order. We do a monthly pro forma on our expenses. That's a rather complete financial statement. I'm going to pick some highlights from that through May of this year. We're going to talk a little bit about capital program activities in 2015. We have a bunch of projects, and we'll talk about a couple highlights there. We'll talk about the proposed capital program, what's coming up for 2016, and how that fits into our long-range financial plan of outlook for construction on into the next decade. And then a couple fiscal challenges have arisen where we have some expenses on the sewer side that we formerly covered with capital expenditures, and when we looked a little bit closer at the GAAP accounting rules, it looks like those are not justifiable as capital expenditures because we're not really gaining an asset from doing some of the work that we anticipate. So it poses an operating expense that we have not faced before. And then lastly, just a couple other mentions on other irons in the fire, other things that we're up to. So we actually operate as two different utilities, a water utility and a sewer utility, and we have different books for both. Our budget for the revenue for the combined utilities is on the order of $112 million, and we're anticipating a little bit of a deficit on compared to our budgeted revenue for 2015, principally because of the rates that we had proposed in 2013 for 2014 and beyond were ultimately reviewed by RCA, and we came to a settlement with the regulatory authority to reduce the rates that we had already established for 2014 and 2015, based on some concerns about the justifiability of the rates. We're giving up about $1.5 million, and that means that we're going to be under the projected revenue by about $500,000 on each side for 2015. Let's see. Next. There we go. On the expenses side, we're pretty close to what we had expected in our budgeted appropriation. So the unfortunate part of our business is that there's so much cost tied up in the infrastructure that a reduction in water use does not affect our expenses very much. And also the expenses don't change much based on revenue as well. Those are kind of independent, although not wholly independent. Clearly there's a link, but the expenses are what they are, and the revenue is what we can justify. We're pretty good shape in water. We're a little bit closer to the line on the wastewater side. And that was in the operating expense. We have a number of non-operating expenses, the largest transfer of which is the municipal utility services assessment. Usually constitutes pretty much a major effect on our bottom line. By transferring $12 to $13 million a year to general government, that does affect what we can do with our with the difference between our revenue and our operating expenses. We're kind of the league leader in this regard. When we compared ourselves with other peer utilities in the northern tier and our peers across the country, we're at the very top level of percent of contribution through transfers to general government. And as I said, that does affect our ability to put more money to net income and to improve our financial position and use that equity for infrastructure development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said your MUSA is $12 to $15 million a year?
Yes.
For the general government? I missed that. I didn't know it was that much. And that's just the MUSA, not the OGC.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What is the range as you're looking in the Northwest as far as water utilities?
If I recall right, the median is probably on the order of, let's see, this is about 20% of operating revenue. I think that the median is probably on the order of half that. So this would be like pretty close to 10% of our revenue, a little bit less than 10% of our revenue, and about 20% of our operating expenses. So it's a big chunk.
It'd be good to have facts and figures on that.
Sure, we can. I thought about including that today, but the short time frame for preparation, I've got that slide,
Yeah.
but it's not here.
Yeah.
It shows a deficit here, but in terms of the utility expenses, a deficit in MUSA payments is a good thing. And that rolls down to our net income, what a for-profit company would call profit, and we need the net income to change to improve our equity, essentially net change in equity, and we use that to make investments in lieu of debt in terms of further development of infrastructure. Again, we're in pretty good shape on the water side. We're looking, despite the fact that our revenue is reduced, we're still looking at a probable $2 million exceedance over our budgeted net income for 2015. Not quite so much in wastewater.
What's your debt equity ratio this year?
This year it's pretty close to our target of 67% debt and 33% equity. It's a little bit different for the wastewater, and as we're looking at the long-range financial plan, it's going to get worse for the wastewater. We're probably looking at in the next few years, we'll probably sink down to 25% equity and 75% debt in wastewater.
And that's basically because we're going for state financing of larger projects, right?
The state financing of projects through the revolving fund program is the best approach.
Right.
And we're paying about a penny and a half on the dollar of interest for those kinds of funds. We anticipate that we will need to do a bond issue, or not a bond issue, but a bond issuance, a revenue bond issuance, in the next year or so to help finance that. And depending on the bond market, we're probably looking at 4.5% for bond costs. Considerably more than the revolving fund.
But your debt equity ratio is going to have some impact on that.
It probably will.
Yeah. So you've got a balancing act there.
That's right. Remember that phrase of balancing act. Coming back.
Just a question on the aquifer up there, Cloven. How is the lake doing this year? Enough water coming into it, or is it?
We've been working with the APU and a glaciologist, Michael Loso from APU, has been having students work at Equipment Glacier for several years now. And he terms what's happening in this epoch of warming as the diminishing discharge dividend. And that is to say that because the glacier is retreating, we're getting more water into the lake than we might see in the long term. We still have plenty of ice, plenty of snow in the upper reaches of the Chugach. And I think for our lifetimes, we'll never be concerned with lack of water for the hydropower production or for the domestic water supply for us. But right now, when we have hot days, we get more discharge, and that means we put more water, do tunnel more water through the domestic plant, and the water level rises. The past couple of years, we've had a couple instances where the lake has actually been full by the end of September, and discharging down into the creek.
Taiwan was coming over for a while to buying water and shipping it back. Are they still doing that? They had single hull tankers coming in here years ago.
We haven't done that in my recollection, so as long as I've been with the utility, we continually get calls about that. And the favorite approach several years ago was to fill huge polyethylene bags with fresh water and tow them away with a tug. That hasn't happened either. I've heard that there was a recent shipment from Southeast to another community, but the infrastructure that we have doesn't support particularly what folks want. We don't have sufficient delivery capabilities at the port to fill a tanker quickly enough. I don't know what the docking fees are worth at the port, but it would take a good while for the pipelines that we have and the connections that are available at the port for ships to come in to fill with water there.
Thank you.
Also, it doesn't sound like we have all that much access, excess in terms of pollutant, except just some of it.
Well, we draw down the lake about 60 feet every year, and we only take about 10% of the water. MLP uses about 90% of the water. to run it through the effluent hydrant plant. At some point in time, probably past our lifetimes, there may be a concern about that water and about what the appropriate use of that water is. In the meantime, we've been preparing for increased water use, water consumption by a growing populace in Anchorage by looking at alternative water resources. We have spent, or will continue to spend, money keeping our Ship Creek facility up to snuff, so that in the past year, for example, instead of operating it once or twice a year to help augment the summer water supply, we've been running it every month to make sure that we can turn it on and turn it off on a dime. And we've had some success in improving the process there, so we get better, cheaper water than what we used to get. We also have 14 wells that we use actively, and we would love to have some more wells distributed around the municipality. We've approached J-Bear unsuccessfully to go to J-Bear and do some joint groundwater exploration, and we'll probably continue that conversation because I think it'll be useful to do. Yeah.
We always get inquiries from people on fluoride. Had one recently. They want to know, is fluoride injected into Girdwood with a separate system that we use for AWWU?
The Girdwood and Anchorage systems, Anchorage Eagle River effluent systems are separate. Girdwood is served by a well. We had a fluoride dispenser in that well, and we were feeding until about 2 years ago. We had some technical problems with that. We have since gone out and redesigned how that should be applied. We're testing that unit currently, and we expect to have fluoridation back at the Girdwood well probably by the end of the summer. That will use a little different process, a little different technology than we have
at Girdwood.
Pardon me?
You said we have not had it in Girdwood for
I think it's been about 3 years. I'm not sure the exact date.
We do get public testimony frequently with regards to fluoride. I know you test to make sure you're adding the appropriate level, you have the appropriate level in the water. Their question always is, well, do you test the product coming from the provider from China and to see what else is in it? Or does anybody?
We rely on the National Sanitation Foundation and the National Sanitation Foundation certification to do that. I met with one of the engineers from the Center for Disease Control that has been the big proponent of fluoride use across the country in the American Water Works Association meeting in June. And they underscored the fact that National Sanitation Foundation and other testing agencies apply different standards to different sources. And if there's a concern about source from one country or another, they will apply different standards with respect to the kind of testing that they feel comfortable with. Not only chemical testing, but how the business practices occur as well.
So do you get reports on what that is, what their testing shows?
We don't ask them for reports on that. We'll say that in May of this year, the Centers for Disease Control and EPA confirmed their finding in 2011 that the appropriate dosage of fluoride should be reduced from a range of 0.7 to 1.2 milligrams per liter to a fixed point at 0.7. There's some discussion yet as to what kind of window around 0.7 is the right number to fix to be able to control that number. But they also underscored the fact that fluoride use is probably the best single improvement or the best single advancement in oral health care that's taken place in this century or the last century. So despite the detractors, there's still a lot of science that suggests that it's the right thing to do. Now I've said all that, but I don't mean to be an advocate. I mean, we'll do whatever the Assembly wants to do. It's we're applying that because it's in code. Thank you. A bit about projects. Just point here is that we are tracking projects through the course of the year. You can see that we have probably over 30 construction starts scheduled for the year. We're doing pretty well there. We haven't closed as rapidly as we have early in the year, but we expect to make up for that as we go on through the year. We've got a bunch of projects. We're about $43 million of projects we expect to close on this year. A couple noteworthy ones. Looking at the left-hand column, the first 14612 is the Aspen wastewater treatment facility disinfection upgrade. I'm really pleased with this. We've stopped importing gaseous chlorine into the city in March of this year, and we're now temporarily importing a solution of hypochlorite to do disinfection at the Aspen wastewater plant. By October, we'll be manufacturing the hypochlorite on site. That eliminates a lot of concern about a single source, a single vendor, transshipment from lower 48, shipping to Alaska, to unloading at the port, to trucking through the community to the facility, and ultimately storing hazardous material of chlorine gas on the facility. So I'm happy to see that gaseous chlorine go away. That was a pretty spendy project. We're looking at a grand total of close to $20 million for that project, and I think it's money that's well spent. We'll end up with a process that costs us a little bit more because we'll be paying electricity, but I think that the safety and community safety is definitely worthwhile. The older technology was due to be replaced, but as things have developed similarly across the country, the usage of gaseous chlorine has fallen off, and it's hard to get a better approach to disinfection than what we're using now, or what we're moving toward. The next item is the Ship Creek Water Treatment Facility Heat Exchanger. We're partnering with ML&P on this project. We're helping them dissipate heat from the new plant 2A. Meanwhile, that heat is going to assist in our operations, but more importantly, it's going to provide heat to the community, so that a person, whether he's in Sand Lake or Muldoon, instead of making coffee with water that's 42 degrees, he might be making coffee with water that's 50 degrees. In the long run, that's a huge benefit to the community. It's a modest benefit to utility, or our utility. It helps us a little bit, we think, in terms of preventing ground movement around pipes, and it helps us prevent erosion and corrosion associated with wear and tear of ice in reservoirs by having the water that's just a little bit warmer. But the real benefit is not to AWW's customers as AWW customers, but to the community as savings when you're not burning electricity or burning gas to get that extra heat. Skip it down. I'm not going to go through all these. Fish Creek Interceptor Rehabilitation. That is an old corrugated metal pipe that exists along a bunch of Fish Creek, and it's been studied a couple different times, and finally we're getting to the point where we can replace that work. A lot of that's being done by trenchless technology, inserting essentially a sock inside the pipe, expanding the sock to the full circumference of the pipe, and providing a resin that would provide the structural integrity for the pipe that has been lost through corrosion over the years. But our capital needs are growing faster on the wastewater side than they are on the water side. We're going to have continuous needs for projects. Again, we're using our long-range financial plan to look at what we can afford with respect to what we project for rates, what we project for times that we issue debt, and keeping that debt equity ratio in mind as one of the principal metrics of what makes sense to have sustainable and viable finances over the long term. For this year coming up, we'll have a lot of pipe rehab in the water side. That looks to be about 2/3 of the expenditures that we'll have in the next 6 years will be on the water pipe side. So we'll be replacing pipes that have been corroded. You may have had your daily traffic commute disrupted a couple times over the past couple of years by broken pipe. That's often caused by corrosion of the old ductile and old cast iron pipe that's exposed to corrosive groundwater environment. Little pinholes will exist, and you'd be surprised at how much that much of a hole in pipe can ruin your whole day. Again, with respect to our neighbors, we have very few breaks. We'll have just a couple breaks a month. Some will have hundreds of breaks a month. The difference being that in Houston or in DC or in Atlanta, their pipe is 3 feet deep. They can get in and get out very quickly. Our pipes are 10 feet deep, usually under the roadway. And when we have to dig into the roadway, we have to repair that roadway to the standard that we dug up to get there. And our breaks can be easily $30,000 to $50,000 a pop. So we're doing our best we can to optimize our approach to that and try and find the right approach to what is an economical pipe replacement with respect to how much we pay for pipe breaks versus how much we pay for replacement. And in fact, we're kind of leading the league in the nation and in the world with respect to applying those asset management practices. Trying to say that.
So are you saying about the same capital improvement program that you've had the last 2 years? Are you increasing it, or is that this balance of the debt equity? Are you?
As far as the capital program, we anticipate a slight increase over the next years, so that we're not really expanding the program beyond the consumer price index, but we're looking at $3 million change over the next 6 years on the water side, $5 million change on the sewer side. So it's gradually going to be stepping up.
For how many, for the next
6 years?
6 years. I mean, because as you know, that's been one of our issues is again debt equity.
Absolutely.
You know,
and we have to take all those different metrics in mind and in place, and we review our metrics and our financial standing with the rating agencies basically biannually for each utility. So we'll do water one year and wastewater the next year. And the debt that we have is a heavy burden, and they recognize it, we recognize it. But they're appreciative of the approach that we've taken and the rigor with which we've held to making sure that we have the rates to support the needs that we have. So far we're still in the AA and AA plus columns.
I presume the camera technology is helping you tremendously in terms of not replacing pipe based upon time in the ground, but replacing it based upon the optics there.
That's right. When we did a major first look with cameras and with new technology in water pipeline inspection, we said, well, if we had done this 10 years ago, we would have replaced this whole half-mile of pipe. But we recognize that there's only a couple sections that are suffering serious corrosion. We go out there and fix those. So we took $50 million out of the water program a couple years ago on the basis of our condition assessment. That's not to say that we can take it all away, because we still have need. But that is helping, and it's necessary part of that. Some projects that we do have, this is more of a project enhancement than a project rehab. You'll note the blue line is what we call the Anchorage Loop, bringing water from northeast Anchorage, from Ship Creek, and from Eklutna around the city. Over the course of the past 20 years, we completed the Eklutna line about 30 years ago, and what we call the Anchorage Loop, going down Boniface, down Abbott Road, out Diamond, out to Kincaid, as the Anchorage Loop. We also have major transmission lines going downtown. Well, that was more of a signal than a loop. And what we've realized is that we don't have a real secure hold on that, and it would be useful for us to have redundancy in water supply, particularly to southwest Anchorage. The red area shown here is the area that would be impacted by a break in the loop line in the Abbott Road, Hartselle Road area. A significant number of our customers in the southwest of Anchorage would be affected by a break along the loop line someplace. By going to the blue oval, we can look at projects that would connect the transmission lines from downtown to the Kincaid Reservoir and complete the loop and have redundant supply for all of our customers in Southwest.
So when are you going to make that connection?
Well, we're going to make the connection through a series of different projects timed with DOT. So as they're building Dowling Road, we've done the bit of pipe that's in the overpass over the railway on the section of Dowling Road. We're going to be doing some more of that. Midtown Water Transmission Main would be in concert with DOT again, working up and down C Street, and we'll have some more storage at Kincaid as well. So it's going to take a while. It's going to take 8 years. It's going to take a fair amount of money, but the right approach to doing it is to make sure that we have doing it in concert with other projects, so that we're making the best advantage of that.
I want to notice Mr. Paskey's addition.
Amy, did you want me to start again?
No.
Need to.
Yeah, we'll see if we can step up here. Classic water pipe rehabilitation. One of the commutes that may have been ready to do this spring was a break right in front of East High. We had to block the lane of traffic there. We were able to get in, get out in just a few hours of closure of that lane. But those kinds of things do happen, and a lot of it has to do with corrosion, so we want to stay ahead of that. And this segment, all the way from Wesleyan to Bragaw, is one that may be best suited to have that SOC trenchless technology used to do the rehab work. That design hasn't started yet, but will be, and that's one approach that we'll take. Also down in the industrial area, we've got a couple projects down near the port, down near the railroad, that are transmission lines as well. We need to have those for security of our industrial operations. That's where we want the fire flow when we have the fire. On the wastewater side, we've already put a fair amount of money into a couple of improvements at the Girdwood wastewater plant. New generator, new admin building, and new influent pump station. We're working very closely with ADEC and EPA to try and develop a course for permitting and approval of the discharge limits. Since legislation changed in the 1990s, a mixing zone is not allowed in an area where there's salmonid raising. Salmonids are present or reds are present. That's clearly the case in Glacier Creek. Interestingly, the guy from Fish and Game said, yeah, there's lots of fish down there. A lot of people fishing in Glacier Creek. I don't care about your discharge. It's not causing any problems. Well, that was nice to hear from him, but it's DEC's problem in that they have the statute to live up to. So we're working with ADEC to try and get the right resolution of that permit issue.
And that has to be a primary, right?
No, that's a secondary plant, or actually a tertiary plant.
Well, I was thinking.
Because it's discharging into freshwater into Glacier Creek. So right now we have actually a sludge process followed by filtration and then disinfection. The processes that we're looking to replace that with would be something new and different, but and hopefully, well, presumably more efficient. Eagle River, there's work to do up there. I'm going to skip through that. King Street is where our O&M is based. We've got a number of improvements to that building to make. And then one of our bigger issues is this interceptor upgrades and maintenance there. We discovered through our condition assessment of our water pipes and our wastewater pipes that, holy smokes, we got a lot of debris in the big wastewater pipes. And we've been diligently cleaning the smaller pipes, the 8 to 12 inch pipes, but we really don't have the capacity the capability of cleaning the bigger pipes. As a result, there's been an accumulation of debris. Some are 30%, some are 50% full in those big interceptor pipes, and that provides a significant risk for blockage and sanitary sewer overflows. Sanitary sewer overflows are a particular problem. It was a break in a sanitary sewer overflow that flooded Waikiki Beach with sewage and caused the city of Honolulu to lose their permit for their wastewater discharge. And it's going to cost them many hundreds of millions of dollars over many years to make amends there. So we are very adamant that we want to make sure that we're doing the best job we can to keep our sewers operating as effectively as possible.
What was the break last year on Northern Lights?
The break on Northern Lights was a water line break. Yeah. We don't break many sewer pipes, but the issues come up when there's a clog from grease, when there's a clog from gravel or deleterious material that gets into the sewer pipes and just holds up the flow. So we looked at what's going to take to clean these pipes. It's going to take a lot. Working with a contractor that was doing our condition assessment, they said, well, it's specialized equipment. You got to bring these experts up from Seattle. You've got this to do this year. You got that to do next year. You got that to do next year. We're probably looking at $16, $17 million series of projects. And we thought, well, shoot, we could capitalize it. Well, we can't capitalize it. We can't capitalize it. So we're going to have to do it with operating expenses. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's buy the equipment, which we can capitalize, and then do it ourselves. Now, that's a new duty and something that we haven't done before. So that's a operating expense that we haven't faced. So we're going to work with our board to work closely to figure out what the best approach is to recommend to you all with respect to whether we need an operating budget increase to do that, or what things should we not be doing in order to accommodate that.
Let's know what the cost of the people are and to get them trained, because if we can do it ourselves, I'd rather do it ourselves and keep requiring some little 40 to come up here and do it.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a
Well,
cost.
this suggests that the difference is $13 million. It's about for the same work that we would have our contractor for $16 million, we can do it for $3 million plus another $1.7 to $2 million in equipment. That's a no-brainer.
And then does the equipment sit around and wait for another use?
We don't know how fast it takes to fill these things up. So we anticipate that we've got at least 3 to 5 years of pretty heavy-duty cleaning to do. Past that, we expect that we'll have some regular cleaning to do. It might not be as difficult, but we'll have the equipment to do it.
Okay. Give us the cost of the manpower and to get them trained. And
Yep. Yep. The training is implicit in these numbers here.
Thank you.
But our wastewater utility funding is tight. We talked about the capital needs at the plants. We talked about the operational expenses. We have not had a rate increase in 2015 nor for 2016. In fact, we've had a refund that will be apparent in your mailboxes and your sewer bills over the next few months. And that's due a lot to delayed project startups and working through new processes with OEO and competing for procurement office time with other groups. Difficulty in filling staff positions. When we had our own HR functions within the utility, we're hiring people in a matter of weeks. Working through ER, it's been months. So that has affected our ability to bring people on.
For me?
Later.
So what are we going to do to ensure sustainability in the context of these challenges? We've got to support future rate adjustments. We have to maximize the use of the 2015 appropriation. I'm going to be pounding on the desk with our staff people and with the ER to make sure we get everybody hired that we need and that we have timely construction processes. So we don't want to miss a beat when it comes to putting out an RFP and putting out an invitation to bid. We have to maintain bond coverage. This is very important, Jennifer knows, for our bond ratings, debt coverage and operating cash on hand are something that they look at closely, along with a host of other metrics. So the balance, this is the guts of the story here. The balance is, do we accept the risk of further deferral of that sewer maintenance, or do we accept a reduced net income and impaired financial condition by going without that? We'll have to sort that out, and we'll make a recommendation to you with the help of our board.
With plenty of time to bring it up to us so we can debate it.
Yeah. So other irons on the fire, just to close out. I mentioned the Ship Creek treatment plant to dissipate heat from Plant 2A. We're working with Mark and his folks to ensure that we have equitable funding of both projects and equitable fees going each way if that's necessary. We're working with the Clute Inc. to provide major water and sewer infrastructure to Powder Reserve up in northwest quadrant of the Eagle River there. The city has noticed a significant shortfall in housing. The development of the Powder Reserve could provide a significant boon to that. One of the issues for that developer and for any developer of a large tract like that is how to get the major, very expensive projects in place to build the infrastructure that you can build housing around. Sewer pump stations, water transmission lines are part of that. We have to find a way to expedite that for the developer without affecting either our tariff or without affecting our existing customers, because our claim has been that the cost causer should always be the cost payer. In the case of new housing for the community, that's a public value that we might have to revisit with respect to what the benefits are. There are certainly benefits to those larger scale trunk and water transmission line improvements for us, but we have yet to find the right way that we can fairly provide for those kinds of projects, not just for Clute, but for large scale developers as well. I mentioned working closely with DECA on discharge from Glacier Creek. The 600-pound gorilla, which I haven't mentioned, is the permit for the Asplin wastewater plant, which is a marine discharge, and that's a primary plant.
That's year to year at this point, right?
It's administratively extended. The permit actually turned out in 2005, so we've been extended for 10 years, and no word from EPA on how fast they want to move to reauthorize that or to not reauthorize it. Frankly, I'm pretty sure that EPA is considering this and considering the work that they have in front of them. If they grant us the continued reauthorization under the 301H provisions, that will get litigated by environmental groups. I would hope that since I think we have the right message and the right technology, I would hope that if that's refuted and they tell us to go build a secondary plant for $700 million, I would hope that the city would step up and say, that's not the right approach either, and that decision would be litigated somewhere down the line as well. So I think we're a little ways away from a conclusion, but that starts with EPA's commencement of public announcement of the 301H decision and the permit decision.
Just quickly, are we concerned about bluff erosion by the outfall? I know the airport is concerned enough. They asked Corps of Engineers to look into what it would take to armor, I guess, that bluff all the way down past our outfall. Are we concerned about damage from that?
We're looking at contracting the coastal engineer to think about that, but that hasn't been something that's really been high on our radar screen. It's on the edge. And lastly, we're working on emergency preparedness. I would invite you all to come to a talk that we're having at East High next Wednesday at 9 and repeated at 12:30. My counterpart from Napa, California, ran her water system for 80,000 people through a major earthquake for them, 6.5, centered right in the middle of Napa last August. and I heard her talk, and I wanted to make sure our staff heard how Napa, California, responded to the earthquake that landed in there. They woke them up at 3 o'clock in the morning and what they had to do next. So if you have an interest, give me a holler, and we'll make sure there's room for you. At East High, 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and repeated at 12:30 on Wednesday.
City or county?
City.
City. I went to high school there. I know where it's at.
I lived there
You probably know where the fault is. It's probably your fault.
for, it is in
It's been my fault.
I think that's all I had, so I'll get off the stage and let somebody that knows what they're talking about.
Other questions from the? Okay, good. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We could have gone on for 3 more hours, I'm sure, in terms of questions and stuff. Did you have a question for him? Always. And who's next? Who do we have?
Solid waste.
Solid Waste Services, Paul.
I don't know if I can follow a good show like that.
Hey,
Just give up now.
he hadn't been here for a
Get out of
while.
here.
You've been here, so. Do you have a handout?
Let's pull this out.
And then you want to do down here. Left-hand corner, the slideshow icon is lower left. Third one will be right. One more. Right. There you go. Perfect. Got it.
Okay, well now that we've figured this out, solid waste services, I appreciate everybody giving us a little bit of time to talk about solid waste services. Would like to tell you we had some server problems, so we weren't able to get all the information we wanted to provide to everybody. Our server is no longer at SWS, our server is now downtown, and unfortunately we're having some communication problems with it, and it just didn't want to talk to us, so we weren't able to get all the information.
Just send that stuff to us and then we can go over it whenever.
We'll talk a little bit about what solid waste services is comprised of. We've got 3 different divisions: our disposal, collections, and administration. And each function has a supervisor over each division that reports directly to me. Our disposal operations, we're responsible for 3 facilities: the Anchorage Regional Landfill, Central Transfer Station, and the Girdwood Transfer Station. Now, if you look at the numbers alongside each one of those locations, those are the number of vehicles that go through those facilities on a yearly basis. And as you see number 2, it's 163,584. That's an average of over 500 vehicles a day. That facility is only closed 2 days a year, New Year's Day and Christmas Day. So we see a lot of traffic come in and out of that facility. Girdwood is one of our lesser used facilities. It's a smaller area, smaller community, but it does see, as you can see, quite a few folks throughout the year. Our disposal operations, we gather a total of 320,000 tons of garbage a year. That's quite a lot of garbage. And we also have 2 contracted facilities that are at our locations. One hazardous waste collection facility located at the Anchorage Regional Landfill, and one hazardous waste collection facility located at CTS, the Central Transfer Station. And their primary function is to accept any type of household hazardous materials. We also do accept some commercial levels of hazardous waste, and there is a fee for that. The actual cost for the hazardous waste program is part of the solid waste budget.
At both facilities?
I'm sorry?
You receive commercial at both facilities?
Yes, sir, we do. We have a leachate operation that runs 7 days a week, 7 nights a week. And right now we're probably one of Brett's best customers. We send them about 90,000 gallons a night. That's three tanker trucks running all evening long, 10-hour shifts. And that goes out to the Turbine Street facility. We also have our landfill gas to energy facility, and right now we're providing enough power to supply J-Bear with about 50% of their electricity. That in our expansion program, you'll see later on in there that we're going to have an expansion. I'm sorry.
How many generators are we running there?
Currently, we have 5 generators. They are working on the 6th one now, and we're also, as you'll see later in the presentation, we're also working on increasing our methane gas collection program, and that'll be one of our capital expenditures in the years to come. The disposal facility currently has 49 full-time employees and 5 seasonals. Seasonals are about 4 months to 6 months, depending on how long the weather holds out. Our collections division, it basically does all the collections in our mandatory service area. As far as we have automated residential curbside collection, we have 16 commercial and residential routes collected daily. We also still offer pack-out service. And pack-out service is basically where the driver gets out of the truck, he runs to the door and grabs the can. Some people who are disabled or elderly have to have that service, and some of that service is available only because we can't get our trucks down into small streets, small areas. We also provide commercial dumpster service in the mandatory service area. As you can see down at the bottom, these are the dumpster sizes we currently have. We have 2,700 commercial accounts, and we provide commercial service 6 days a week.
Paul, on the last one that you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
Mandatory service area, but you do give exemptions because you don't have the size dumpsters available.
That is correct.
How many exemptions do you give out a year?
It actually varies. This year we've given out probably, I want to say, over 600 already this year in this construction season.
So have you told the new administration the type of equipment you need so we don't have to deal with these exemptions?
We have not had an opportunity to sit down and explain all this to them. It's going to take a little bit of time to break it all out. We also have an alternative, which you'll see later on in the presentation. We have an alternative that may be able to benefit us just as well and give us some information so we can decide whether or not we want to get into that business or not.
Do we lose the money from an outside company coming in to do this?
We're losing money right now.
Percentage that you get?
We're losing quite a lot of money right now. We need to figure out a way to stop that bleeding and put a patch over it, and I think we've got a patch for it.
I'll look forward to you guys taking the administration and bringing it to us, because I want to close this loophole.
All right, sir. We'll work on it. Thank you. Okay. We provide roll cart repairs and dumpster repairs. As you can see, we have a repair facility where we replace tops, wheels, handles, so on for our own roll-off carts. And we also replace carts when they're needed to be, and then they have a good warranty on them. So if they're damaged within 10 years, they're prorated, and we can get a warranty dollar back on them. Our dumpster service, We have a dumpster repair facility that actually will, if a dumpster is burnt or if it's been hit by a car, will repair the dumpster, paint it, weld it, make whatever repairs are necessary. We've also been, this year has been a pretty active year for bears, so we've been, a lot of places didn't want bear lids and now they're calling for the bear lids, so we've been putting on new bear lids and a lot more areas than we normally have. Usually people will call in and decide they want them, and then at the end of the season they'll ask us to switch them back out because they're so heavy. But we're providing that service as well. We have a full service vehicle maintenance center. We provide all the repairs and maintenance for 26 collection vehicles. Primarily, our smaller vehicles go out to the landfill where they're taken care of out there. Collections has 27 full-time members and two seasonal members or staff, and we're hoping that we can expand that a little bit as we begin to initiate new programs. Our administration division. It's pretty much everything under our roof happens there. It's customer service, scale operators, our accounting department. We have a payroll department, accounts receivable and payable. We have purchasing and human resources, safety, IT, and unfortunately they were out this week, so that was one of the reasons we were having problems. And then we have recycling, public education, and our PIO, which let's see here. Okay.
Some of that's designed to go to the SAP, to Chronos.
I'm sorry?
Is some of that timekeeping and other things going to go to the new system?
We're working with Surrey Company, I believe, to try and resolve the issues that we've had to see if we can make everything pair up. But I'm not quite sure where that stands just yet because this company that's out evaluating this whole system hasn't gotten back to us yet.
I just wondered if that centralized was going to change our staffing level.
I don't know for sure because we don't know which way we're going to go with that system yet. Okay.
So are you, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a policy decision to make sure as much as possible as the community was fully integrated IT-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So you are not going out and getting a system that is not something that is different than the rest of it?
No.
No, okay. And then what's your percentage, what's your administrative, percent of administration over employee, the cost of the administration for your budget?
Do you remember what our administration budget is? Off the top of your head? Those were some of the figures we were trying to capture, and unfortunately couldn't get the data.
And
but I can get it back to you.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Department accomplishments. Well, we've opened 11 and 12. $10.7 million project, 19.5 acres, and we've got 4.5 million cubic yards of airspace that we're currently filling now. And that project was completed in 2014, but we didn't start accepting waste until the beginning of the year, 2015. We're just completing Cell 8B, which is going to be for construction material, which may be open just in time. It's a $2.2 million project, covers 5 acres, 350,000 cubic yards, and if those buildings come downtown, we're going to use a lot of that space. And that's basically just strictly for inert materials and demolition materials. Our leachate collection system improvements. We've done a lot to that system. We had the same problem that you do, Brett, with a little clogging in the lines. Ours gets as hard as a rock, and we've got to go in and have people come out with huge snakes burrow through the material and open it back up. We were able to get another line cleared this year. We also did a rehab on the bolts which holds the leachate, and then it goes into the retention ponds. And we've cleaned those out, and the system seems to be working at maximum capacity right now.
At one point you had said that there was an idea to approach the base for a
Pipeline. We are picking that idea around. We have some politically sensitive issues right now that we're holding back until we can discuss further with the new administration. We implemented a new scrap metal and battery program last year. In 2013, that program cost us $160,000 a year to run the program. We were paying people to take our scrap metal, our batteries, and so on. In 2014, we turned it around. We put the program out to bid. We actually made $100,000 in 2014 off of the program. This year, we're anticipating somewhere around $75,000, but that's due to a market turn down on all the recyclables, not just the scrap metal, but on batteries, plastic, aluminum, steel, paper as well. We've been able to reduce some of our overtime in our scale houses. We run a very, very, very tight ship as far as staffing goes out there. We've got 8 scale house operators, and we've switched to 8-hour shifts and reorganized our scheduling, and we've been able to reduce our hours of operation out there. We've made some quick changes to our routing systems thanks to the new ARM system that we're putting in, and evaluated our the way we were having people go to lunch, the drivers, and we managed to reduce our fuel usage by about 2%, which if you're using $750,000 a year, that's a little bit of money. Our ARM system is completely installed. We should be totally operational with it, and all the trucks, residential and commercial, should be completed by mid-September to late September. The route management system has helped us so far in reducing a route and a half of our collection, our residential collections. And now we just got word some of the mobile homes would like to have residential roll carts rather than dumpster service. So that's going to increase. That's going to increase the number of routes that we have.
That's a small truck operation.
It is.
Used for the alleys.
It is. It can actually be either. Depends on if this park wants to go totally. It's 380 cans by itself. This one park. Our spring cleanup. I think there was a handout that I gave everybody. Yep. I want to just talk real quick about it a little bit. I'm really proud of what's happened. We've managed in 2013. We were able to get the spring cleanup out to the Anchorage Regional Landfill, and it became more efficient for us. That was our first year out there. As you can see, it was a little high per ton, but we learned a lot. We learned that we didn't need quite as much staffing as we had out there, and the next year, you can see it's kind of evident we really did learn something. 2015, it was definitely a success. We had 6,050, right, Kenneth? 6,050 cars on the 2 days. 3,025, basically, on each Saturday. And as you can see, the price went up a little bit, but we serviced more people, and we received more garbage. Some of our initiatives this year are, we're going to evaluate our commercial exemption program. We're going to review the program costs, our process, and then we're going to be presenting some ordinances for. Basically, we'd like to implement a exemption charge and for people that are placing dumpsters in our service area or roll-off boxes in our service area, which will provide more information to you as we work with administration and with legal.
Right now, we just give them that exemption. We do not.
Right now, they come into the office and say, I want an exemption to put a 30-yard roll-off in your area. And we just fill out the paper and give them an exemption. We're looking at a way to benefit from that without having to buy equipment and have our own dumpsters, our own roll-offs out there. We're going to be opening up our, I skipped over the new bulk process. We're looking real hard at a new bulk item collection fee schedule. Bulk items have gotten to the point where they're very plentiful. Not only are they flooding us at the transfer stations, but we're getting calls for a lot more material to be picked up. And we're not really recouping our costs for the labor. Those rates have not changed, I believe, in 7 years. So we're looking at redoing that ordinance and increasing the fee schedule on it. Hopefully around August 1st, we'll be opening our new recycling facility at the Central Transfer Station. And we want our facility to be a one-stop center. People will be able to bring their recycling, their hazardous waste, their scrap metal, and their garbage all to one location, and away they go.
So with that recycling center, then will you do an RFP out to the recyclers that are currently, like, and I can't remember whose Smurf it is now, but
it's Rock West now.
Rock West. And I mean, they're basically doing the backhauling and the recycling are major consumables, and then we have all sorts of scrap metal. Are we going to be doing that now, or are you going to RFP out to others?
We've already done the RFP for scrap metal. We're under contract with Schnitzer.
Okay,
we recently have sat down and talked with Rock West, and there's room for an agreement, but right now there's still a major cost. It's costing us $40 a ton to bale all the recycling that goes over there. And that's quite a lot. So we're looking at alternatives. I'm sorry?
Are your alternatives local, or are they?
Our alternatives are basically us installing our own baler. I'm examining those costs to see what it would cost us to eliminate that $40 a ton process. It may be more beneficial for us to bale our own plastics and paper and sell it on the open market.
Because the margins are still about this deep.
The margins are not that great. That's right.
I'm concerned for us to get into this business.
Well, I didn't say we were going to. I'm investigating.
People's space and equipment, I believe. So all those should be looking at coming to us with proposals.
Yes, sir. We'll put that out for a bid when we decide to which direction we really want to go. But we need to do our due diligence and study all our options before we go in any direction. Okay, commercial recycling dumpsters. We're looking at putting cardboard dumpsters in the downtown area, which would be something new to us. We really haven't done any type of commercial recycling, and we're hoping to step up our recycling program altogether as far as paper goes. Papers and cardboard are two of the primary commodities that still have a lot of value and will always keep their value. We're also considering the possibility of the Bagster type service. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's basically a big nylon bag that you can put 10 yards of remodeling material, demo material, whatever, and you just pick the whole bag up and it goes away. And you don't need, the only thing you really need for that is basically a truck with a boom on it, and away you go. So we're looking at that option as well. We're trying to figure out different ways that we can increase our revenues without increasing our fees to our citizens. Kenneth, can you come up for just a minute? I'd like you to talk a little bit about this. This is Kenneth Brady. Kenneth is new to our facility, and she is the recycling coordinator, PIO, a whole bunch of hats, right?
Yes, multi hats, absolutely. So Paul and I have been working pretty diligently to increase our communications with our customers, with the business community, with our nonprofits, and then also within our recycling community. We have, in the last year, just in 2015, we have a couple of different initiatives that we've worked on with the school district. So we've been doing some career and technical education programs, our school business partnership. We've also worked with the Anchorage Chamber to become an ambassador and to become more engaged with our business community partners, especially when you just saw some of our programs that we're working on are some of our commercial programs, and being able to pilot those. So making sure we're fostering those relationships. We've also moved into an age and an era where public communication via social media is becoming more important. So we have created a Facebook, a Twitter account, we have an Instagram account, and as most municipal departments did in the last year, we also went on board with our Nixle. So Nixle is a service I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point, but it allows us to communicate better with both the residents of Anchorage and then also with our media. So we're able to put out press releases to both the public and to the media, making sure that we're communicating with the right people at the right time. We also have on our at our facilities, we've been working to update all of our handouts. We've classified that into a couple different categories, similar to what you just heard me say. We have a couple that are for our business partners or for our recycling partners. And then we also have some that are just for our citizens and for our customers, whether they're on our commercial side, on our public side, or at our household hazardous waste facilities. We've also been updating our website. We've been trying to capture, or better capture, I should say, feedback from our customers and from our clients on what questions they have when they're at our facilities or when they're on our website, what's confusing. And we've been trying to update the terminology and the information that we're getting to them to better target that confusion. And then we also have our email newsletter. We've been trying to switch over from, some of you may remember, our A to Z guide or our paper.
Finally stopped the A to Z guide.
We've stopped it.
It's taken 7+ years.
Yeah. So we have completely eliminated that, and we're looking at different options to work with our recycling community on things like an app that might provide something similar. But in the meantime, what we have is we've been collecting information when people come to our site. So we've been collecting their names, their phone numbers, and their emails whenever possible to build a list to be able to communicate more effectively and kind of consistently with our clients and with our citizens. So we have an email that goes out quarterly, sometimes a little bit less than that, about special events and changes in policy, things that we're accepting, things we're not accepting. And we also are trying to update our facilities, our signage, to be a little more engaging with our public. So we thank them for coming. We encourage them to communicate with our customer service department with any questions, to follow us and engage with us on social media. And we've been trying to have a bigger presence at community events. So when we have our centennial coming up, for example, or doing tours of our regional landfill or central transfer station, for that matter, especially with our new recycling facility, for different community groups, Girl Scout troops, classrooms, businesses, anyone who's really interested. So that's a few of the things we're working on. We've got some other ideas coming down the pipeline for sure, and we're continuing to build our engagement.
Are you familiar, sorry, with the government that calls it, basically they're a startup program and they take government problems, it's national, and we have a chapter here in town where things like if you wanted to look for an app, they will work on that on their own time and come up with something that's
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
No, I haven't heard specifically of that, but I'll make a note of it. Definitely
Yeah,
look
and
into
I'll
it.
try to, Brennan is the guy that runs the local chapter here. I'll try to remember. I have a question now that's senior line, just with my brain, please.
We do need to press something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something, give me.
I can get you my card too, and if you have
Yeah.
any questions for follow-up or you come up with the name of that, I'd love to hear that. So that'd be great. Perfect.
Okay, and we are working on one big event coming up soon. We hope is the Customer Appreciation Day. We'll have a lot of. This will be the third year that we've done it. It'll be a lot of fun and games and food and activities for everybody, and that happens August 1st, 10 to 3, 10 to 2,
11 to 3.
11 to 3, at the Central Transfer Station. We hope to see some of y'all there. I'm sorry?
How do you advertise that?
Well, she has gotten really good at mass media. Yeah, and it's in all our bills that go out. We also hand out flyers, and social media has really been a lot of help. We also have a couple of major projects coming up. We've got a feasibility study and evaluation of determining what the life expectancy of CTS is. Currently, as I said, we're looking at 500 to 525 cars and vehicles that come through our facility, not only cars, but commercial vehicles. And we're feeling the aches and pains of age. The maintenance costs are getting higher for that facility. We continue to have to do repairs to the floors. July 20th, we'll be shutting the scales down and having all commercial vehicles go out to landfill for 4 to 5 days because we're going to have to pull the scales out to basically replace load cells and just overhaul. And that's just on one side, but we're still going to shut that facility down.
How old is that?
It was installed in the 80s, so it's had a useful life. We can only give it so much electricity to try and bring it back. We're also looking at doing a recycling study, a waste analysis to see what kind of waste we're actually generating with things that are recyclable in our waste streams, and to try and get an idea of where we want to go with our recycling program. One of the major issues that we've got right now is we're facing an air conditioning heating system at CTS that is in dire need of repairs. It may not make the winter. We're going to try and breathe life into it one more winter and see what happens. But upcoming projects. We'll be closing in September for a week to repair the tipping floor at CTS. That's something we've had to do every year since I've been here. That floor takes such a beating that it begins to crack and the metal begins to pop. The rebar begins to pop to the surface. So we've got to recoat that floor almost every year. We're looking at relocating the HHW building. Right now, if y'all remember correctly, it's in 2 old rail cars. Those rail cars are from the 40s, I understand. They've been around a long time, and the folks have a porta potty out there. They have to work in that during the winter, and I'm sure it's not enjoyable for them. But we're looking at doing something with that and putting it in the maybe possibly putting it in the old AAA building that had the office and area back over in that area, or possibly purchasing a portable building to replace that facility. We're also looking at the CTS customer drop-off facility. The Citizens area has really gotten to the point where it's so congested on Saturdays, Fridays, and Saturdays that it's very difficult for people to maneuver around out there. So we're outgrowing the facility. It's just getting to the point where it's in the next couple of years it's going to be totally obsolete for us, because we won't be able to handle the capacities. One of the things you were asking about, Mr. Steele, is we're looking at different options right now for the leachate, the 90,000 gallons a night that we're processing. One of the things that we're looking at right now is the possibility of using evaporators. You can see this evaporator is it's about $200,000 a unit. It would put a dent in it, and reduce our overtime and some of our trucking. However, it wouldn't eliminate it altogether. And we certainly would want to take your money away. We're also considering the possibility of the pipeline from our leachate containment facility over to the J-Bear sewer system. But there's, as I said, there's some hurdles we have to get before we can even really push much further than where we're at right now. We're looking at increasing our gas volume so that we can help keep that number 6 Jenbacher engine that's coming out. I believe they're supposed to have that engine out sometime around the first of the year. And although we have enough capacity now, we want to be able to make sure that we continue with that capacity so that we're putting in new pipelines for collection of methane gas. Okay, Mr. Tim.
You want me to talk about?
Sure, come on up real quick and just give everybody, this is Tim Kelly. Tim Kelly, and I brought our new employees here so maybe you could see some faces and if you had questions you can always direct it to them. This is Tim Kelly. Tim Kelly is our new finance manager.
So both departments have anomalies, but before I address that, back to your question about administration, I believe last year it was $1.4 million. And then it's allocated against both disposal and collections, about 50-50, 49, 51, something like that. It basically runs to about 6% of the total cost. Collections, I have to apologize about the numbers a little bit. As Paul said, we had an issue with our server. It was kind of hard to pull numbers, so about 20 minutes before we came, I was pulling numbers and trying to put them into this slide. Revenues, we're running about where we should be. As you can see, we're about 98%. If you get down in, this is just collections and expenses, we're a little bit short at 72% for direct costs, but the reason for that, and what I do is I try and do this year to date, is, as the assembly members know, we have a $2 million contribution that wasn't originally budgeted. Okay, so that has not come out in our actual costs yet. So percentage-wise, that's why it's at 72%. On the charges, the IGCs, you can see it, we're running about 92%. So we're kind of happy with this number right now, but it does throw off our net gain without the recognition of the contribution. If we take out the contribution in our net gain, we're right where we should be as to budgeted.
Yep. The other place that's going to affect us is that $2 million comes with additional IGC charges. You want to explain that a little bit on the next
Well,
page?
it depends on which IGC you're talking about. Some IGCs are based upon your total operating expenses, and as soon as you put $2 more million in there, the percentage on the IGC went up. So,
all yours.
For disposal is a seasonal entity. You know, most of the time, whenever you talk about disposal, we have a lot more people come out to the landfill during the summer. So, as you can see, if I do a year-to-date based upon annualization, I'm only running about 74%, 60% on my costs, but that's because that's all springtime. That's all springtime work, winter, springtime, where we don't have as many cars. This will probably flip-flop in September, October. At the end of the summer, we're going to be over. We're going to be running probably 100, 101%, somewhere around in there. But again, those are explainable numbers, so we're pretty comfortable with this so far. Do I have any questions?
I don't on this, but the question I wanted to ask before, and you can answer it offline for me. Have you heard or have anything come out of Paul Warren's office as far as getting any of the the waste off from that land. Port Warren's off, we had a guy.
That basically is our presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have come up with. If I can't answer it, I'll get you the answer. I promise you that.
I'd like to follow up with just a meeting, because I have a whole list. So
Okay.
I think it's just be easier for just
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I appreciate it very much. You're spurring some questions, so I may have to get back to you too. Barbara, is there, can we extend 15 minutes? Is that an issue?
It's a work session.
Work session.
What the heck did you do here, Paul? Okay. Well, do we need this? Now that I broke it?
Ready to break it, paper?
No. Yeah. I'm going to go around the other side. All set? Okay.
For you.
All right, so we'll just start out with a little bit of history. In 1961, circa 1961, September, this is what the port looked like when the ribbon got cut on it. That's all there was, that little dock there. Believe it or not, that transit shed building is still in existence. We've attached admin offices to the north side of that. They used to be in the south side of that. We provide that space now to CH2M. And it was a pretty Sleepy Hollow kind of place, and then along came the '64 earthquake, and you can see what happened to just about every other port facility in South Central and Prince William Sound. And there was nowhere left to bring in the resupply, reconstruction projects and all of that. Sealand at the time, then Horizon Lines, now Matson, used to go constantly into Seward. They stopped going into Seward. They started to come up to Anchorage. Early 70s, we established a long-term relationship with them, and shortly on the heels of that, Tote came along. And now we have the two ocean carriers that come there, and the port's grown to what it is today. And this is what we look like today. And it's actually a little bit bigger. It goes out this end, about 60 acres, and it goes back this way about another 20, 30 more, mostly all petroleum storage out at that end of the port. But this is the operating center of the whole facility. Okay. A little bit about how much stuff comes into the port, and we asked the McDowell Group to update those numbers. We've been out there chanting now for the last 8-10 years that were based on a 1999 master plan. It said maybe it was time to relook at those and truth check them so that we can get a little bit more realistic about just what the big deal is. And we used to caveat those old numbers with 90% of the consumer goods, but it made more sense when you're talking about shipping business to talk about everything. So this is a percentage of everything number, and how much of it of the freight, dry freight that comes into the south central part of the state, which supports about 87% of the population, comes across the docks in Anchorage compared to what goes into Whittier and all the other little cats and dogs combined.
So that's not cement?
That is cement.
Oil
That's
oil products?
Oh, no. There you are. Yep. No oil, no crude oil, but refined petroleum products. So when you look at the number referenced refined petroleum, it's staggeringly huge, and that is, it's pretty cool. And if you take a look at where infrastructure is around the state, there is nobody that's got the petroleum infrastructure like we have there. 2.8 million barrels of storage currently. It's going to start creeping up here shortly, and 4 different petroleum users. It's pretty amazing. And when you compare what comes into Anchorage to what goes everywhere else,
it's pretty interesting. And we also get resupplied by pipeline, and I think it's cool that we supply Whittier all by truck.
So what does Whittier actually get in there? You said 0.06%?
It's unleaded gasoline and heating oil and those kinds of things. Port calls on an annual basis. I should put some numbers on this. I don't know why we didn't put numbers on this, but it's about 400 ships that call at the Port of Anchorage on an annual basis. And while some of the wedge sizes may change a little bit, appreciably, that's the way the breakout comes. We're going to see a growth in the petroleum tankers, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, and a shrinkage there in the military vessels one, and a growth in the cruise ship one. These are 2014 numbers when we only had 4 cruise ship port calls. We're going to have 9 this year and 9 next year, so that'll get a little bit bigger. And cement ships, there's the potential for them to add one to that is coming along as well. This is a look at our 10-year tonnage. This last bar over here is only through May. We'll have our June numbers probably by the end of the week, early part of next week. It takes a little bit longer to accumulate all of that. But what's important, I think, is to look down here at these two. The container stuff, this is the container business, vans and flats. That's going to be pretty consistently the same size by the time we hit the end of the year. But this is interesting. This is what fuel over the dock was for all of last year. Here's what it is through May. And what this reflects is year to date, 10 petroleum tankers that have called on the port. Last year, in the whole year, we had 14. Last year, in the same amount of time, we only had 4. So we've had 10 this year when we had 4 last year. The growth in refined petroleum products that is being imported and coming across the dock is like going through the roof. Basically the airport, and the big reason for, well, 2 big reasons for it. Flint Hills is what drove us to this new norm, the first new norm, because the demand never went away, but that supply went away, and it had to come from somewhere. And when it comes across the dock, the tariff rate is higher than when it comes the way Flint Hills used to deliver it, which was bring it down by rail and pump it through our valve yard to the customer, which is ASIG at the port. So the valve yard fees all by themselves was all they used to pay, and that's a lot lower than what the tariff coming across the dock is. So we're seeing that grow. And I've talked to John Parrott out at the airport with respect to the air cargo business growth. The best thing that could have happened to us in that area there was that long, drawn-out longshore issue on the West Coast down there, because about the time the holidays hit, there were a lot of folks that weren't getting, manufacturers that weren't getting their goods to store shelves, and they just abandoned ocean shipping and went to air cargo. And all of those 777s and 747-8s that were designed to overfly Anchorage all did that trade-off the cargo weight for fuel calculation and learned you can make a couple $100,000 extra on carrying a full load if you stop in Anchorage to refuel. And we've got that business now, and Mr. Parrott says this is the new norm for him. He watches 7 777s an hour land just for fuel and then leave again. So we're going to be a long-term benefactor of that. This gray area is going to get pretty darn large, and I think it's going to stay there into the foreseeable future. So let's look at our revenues. And some of that is reflected, obviously, in the fact that we're seeing larger tonnage come across the dock. We are 29% higher year to date for fuel, and overall at 13% higher, and this is only through May, 13% higher tonnage across the dock than we were at that time last year. So things are looking really, really good, and we're projecting it to be above the straight line that we forecast. And the numbers are down there to break it out for you. I'm seeing the big differences are not necessarily in the dockage, but it's in the wharfage, because the fuel tariff rate is a little bit higher. Did I miss anything, Cheryl? No? Okay. Expenses, yeah, that's going the right way too. And some of that is because we're really good at what we do, and some of it is dumb luck. I will tell you the dumb luck part is we have not had a maintenance supervisor since January. So we've gone 6.5 months without having to pay a non-rep 15 because there's been nobody in the job. We just hired to fill that position. So starting in August, That'll go back on the payroll, but we bought the time of not having that high a payroll cost. And we're going to offset that a little bit because our PIO leaves at the end of July, and I don't see getting permission to backfill that anytime soon. So on the payroll side, we've got things under control just because of personnel changes, personnel movements. Non-laborers are a big sticky point, and the lion's share of the non-labor are the litigation costs for the lawsuit because of the expansion project. And that eats up not only the big guns, the Seyfarth Shaw contract, but that's also the legal services contract that goes along with that, and some professional expertise that was brought on to do certain work along the ways. I don't see an end to that. And that's going to be one of those things that's going to eat into what we can put into a capital improvement program down the line until this thing gets done. So I'm looking forward to seeing this go to trial or get settled somewhere and be done with. But everything else is pretty much under control. So I think we're really pleased. The maintenance guys have taken a really hard look at what they're doing, and I guess we ought to give credit to the lousy winter for not having to pay overtime for snow removal, because that fits into this as well. Meanwhile, the private sector is busy down at the port, and I wanted to call your attention to these two really big deal things that are going on down there now. Alaska Basic Industries, which owns Anchorage Sand and Gravel, that's the name that you normally used to see them when you're driving around town. Under construction now on their site is, and it's going to be the new landmark for the port. It's a dome that's going to be able to hold 40,000 additional tons of cement. When the ribbon cutting happens on that triples the amount of cement storage that they have down there. Their challenge has always been guessing at how much ought to be on that last cement ship when it comes in at the end of the year, so that they can see their customers through the winter before they can bring the first cement ship in the spring. And they're on the margin a lot of the times, and they didn't like that. Plus, the demand is increasing for them as well. So they saw the business case for putting this additional storage down there, and that's what they've started to do, and they are now currently underway. Delta Western, we did a ribbon cutting for on April the 30th. They've got a big hole in the ground now where there used to be a parking lot. And what they're doing is they're adding 360,000 barrels of new petroleum storage down at the port. And that's what it'll be when it's eventually done. But they're starting out with one 60,000 barrel methanol tank. They have customers up on the North Slope for methanol. And they're going to bring it in across the dock and use the railroad, I think, to take it most of the way, and some trucking to take it the rest of the way to the North Slope. But what's exciting about that is we've never had methanol before. So it's a new product, which means it's a plus to what the volumes have been for everything that everybody else brings in, which is commercial grade jet fuel, military jet fuel, unleaded gasoline, high sulfur diesel, low sulfur diesel. All of that is, everybody's doing that. Nobody's doing methanol, so that's a plus on top of that. So that's pretty exciting too. And yeah, that will push the total capacity for storage down at the port to over 3 million barrels. And there's another thing going on in the background in the Crowley terminal that until it's a sure thing, I'm not going to talk about, but that's going to also blow the roof off of these numbers.
The cement is basic.
Powder.
It's demand.
Yes.
I mean, once you get the tank full, it's demand, and so that's all based upon what's going to happen with the base in terms of construction.
Yeah.
What's going to happen domestically with the construction.
And the mine. The mines buy a lot of cement. They fill veins that they're done exploring with cement.
But these aren't new customers. We're going to have about the same volume come across the dock once the tanks.
Well, no, there's an anticipation that there'll be more volume. Yeah. And I don't know Dale's business well enough, but I do know him well enough to know that they're not going to make a $14 million investment. If they can't amortize it. Yeah. So what keeps the port staff up nights? These are the four biggies. The first one obviously is the one that you hear about the most when we come to you guys for this contract every year, and that's doing something to stay up with the maintenance on the piles. I have a slide that comes after this that I hope scares the hell out of you, because it scares the hell out of me. But that is a chronic problem, and that is the biggest driver behind why we're trying to do a modernization project. It's a never-ending investment. By the time you get to doing all the repairs you need to go back to the ones you did first and start it over again. If you don't do something about the overall condition of the structure, the storm drain systems, there isn't a winter that goes by where we don't have a big hole in the ground from a collapse of some kind. We've got a big storm drain project underway right now, and they're gonna make the repair with what Brett talked about, putting a sock down the storm drain and a resin over the top of it, and just following the hole that's there, and building around the outside of the failing material. And it's got to go all the way from Terminal Road, if you're familiar with the back of the port, to the outfall on the water's edge. So that's a big project, and that's going on right now. But there are others that happen in smaller pieces, parts every single year. There's no emergency backup power down the port. This is the one that you ought to look at me and say you should be ashamed of yourself. But there isn't. For all the stuff that's really important, for the gantry cranes, for the motor-operated valves in the valve yard, for the lift cranes on the petroleum docks, none of that has backup power. When the power goes out, we're screaming at ML&P to get the power back on. That's where we are now with that stuff there. And when the power goes out at the port, it never goes out at the best possible time. So we've got to do something about that, and this is one of those legacy shame on yous that come from the philosophy that, well, we're just going to get a new port, we'll take care of that when we build a new port. The situation being what it is right now, we can't afford to wait anymore. So we've got to get on this, even if adding that to the cost of a new structure becomes redundant later. I'm sorry?
Has that been on your capital improvement list?
It has not been, because
Is this the first I'm hearing?
Yeah, it has not been, and it's because we've been trying to get our heads around just what the requirements are. But we're almost there now, so you'll see it in 16.
Yeah, once we know it, we'd like to hear it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And the MLP is just down the road. I mean, it's not like.
Well, yeah. I mean, we throw an extension cord over the fence.
Right.
Yeah, and we'll plug it in. What worries me there is, this would be a no-brainer and a quick fix if I didn't have to pay $1.5 million a year for legal fees. So somewhere we've got to find a balance. But that's pretty darn important. I mean, that one is 100% within our control to do something about as soon as possible. And then we have an issue down at the boat launch. Whoever's been out there to the boat launch knows it's a money pit for us because we don't make a lot of revenue off of it. But if you go down and look over the side of the north finger where that big anchor is and the nice little park is, if you take a look over the edge, you'll frighten yourself because the erosion is awful. And that's about $1.5 million to fix that problem there. We've been trying to get some grants, and it's been losing out to the competing operational requirements on the real port, and that's been a problem too. And it's probably going to hang together for a little while longer, but we need to get some more armor rock in there and reinforce that too. It's down to where you can see the the rubber that material that you put the rock on top of. That's how far along the erosion is there. So this is the one I wanted to show you. Back last summer, August 2014, R&M, who is our engineering services contractor, did a pile condition study for us underneath the dock. And they looked at all the pile. There's about 1,440 of them, and gave them a rating based on a American Society of Civil Engineers standard. And as you can see, they rated the losses there. And when you look at those losses and you look at the standard, the book says anything where there's 50% or more of material loss, thickness loss through corrosion or what have you, you rate that thing severe. So the best any pile is under the dock is severe. And then they get worse than that in some other areas there too. This is the driver behind why we got to replace the docks. We can support the operational loads. This $3 million, up to $3 million that we spend every year putting sleeves on piles. That allows us to sustain operational loads on the dock. It does absolutely nothing for seismic protection. It does absolutely nothing to extend the life so you can turn your back and go face the next problem. It's a Band-Aid that the next time there's a 9.4 earthquake isn't going to matter. So that's why it's important to get the facility replaced. And I'm gonna step aside now because the next few slides, Todd, who usually gives the briefing when we have this on the status of the modernization project, I'm going to turn it over to him to take this home to the.
Is that to give you a head start so that we don't?
No. I have no fear. I have no fear.
We did distribute the report that you're accustomed to seeing on the project, and went ahead and gave you 11 by 17 of this graphic. I think it's been a while since you may have seen it. And that graphic just goes through the overall project phasing plan. I know in the interest of time, I'm going to try to just hit the high points. We've got two primary work elements ongoing right now with project management and construction management through CH2M Hill. And then I'm happy to report that we recently have Kiewit under construction contract for the test pile program. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's just talk first about the CH2M Hill work in progress. Task Order 2, status quo, that's staffing and maintaining the project management office, of which Lon leads. There's Lon Elliger in the audience. Task Order 4 is a kind of a multifaceted task. We've talked about this in the past. That's our test pile work plan task. Like I mentioned, we've got Kiewit under contract now to perform that work. CH2M Hill's scope has been modified since our last report. You'll see that kind of at the end of our report. We've changed order Task Order 4 to capture the procurement and construction management support for the test pile work plan. Task Order 5 through 8, that's all pre-design activities that CH2M Hill is facilitating for us. Task Order 5 is focused on the marine terminal, hiring the marine terminal designer of record. Some of the recent activities on that over the last period included ship simulations conducted down in Seward at the AvTech ship simulator to validate that phasing plan, essentially, from the pilot and tugboat perspective. Does this work? What are some challenges that we need to focus on? And that effort was very successful, certainly got some good input, and the report on that is being finalized. So that was, I think, a really well executed activity. We this week are meeting with our petroleum stakeholders again to start looking toward the actual petroleum terminal design requirements. So that's underway, and we're looking out another couple weeks to pick up the topic of the gantry cranes with Matson, formerly Horizon. So all that work's underway on schedule. On the building planning side, we've had real good collaboration on stakeholder requirements for the functions that need to relocate out of our transit warehouse building on Terminal 1. And we're getting very close to having the concept site plan and space needs summary done for that. Task Order 7, we completed the procurement analysis on that, briefed the executive committee with a recommendation to pursue progressive design build as the delivery acquisition approach. That was agreed to by the executive committee, and we're moving forward toward that. Again, the decision was progressive design build versus contract manager at risk, or GCCM. On landside site investigation, we're working through where it makes sense and where the opportunities exist to work through existing vendor contracts that other departments may have for some of this work. For example, working with PM&E, they have survey vendor contracts, so we're trying to get some land survey information, pre-design information. Also, actually, AWU has a a contract, I think as part of the GIS Center of Excellence for aerial mapping. We're moving forward to execute some work, a higher resolution, because we're talking pre-design versus GIS for us. So that's actually being worked right now as we speak. And we're also getting some geotechnical investigations done through term contract that the Geotechnical Services Group under PM&E has. So we're working collaboratively with our other sister departments and purchasing to execute as much as we can through existing vendor contracts. There are some separate procurements that we're starting where those don't fill the gap. Task Order 9 is a new task order since we briefed you last. That's on overall program permitting. Work has just started on task order scheduling and drafting the permit matrix that is going to look at various alternatives to permitting all the various, as a group, as a separate entities, trying to maximize efficiencies there. On the Kiewit contract, construction services, this is structured as a 2 notice to proceed contract. We've issued the first notice to proceed to get the essentially pre-construction activities going, the material sourcing, delivery, stockpiling, geotechnical work that we can do without a permitting constraint. We still have a permitting constraint on the test pile side. That's notice to proceed too. We are not expecting to be in a position to issue that this season. We've just met with NIMS. I mean, we've been working very closely with them through the summer. In May, we got a sense that their constraints were not going to support a permit for us this season. We confirmed that last week. So we are, and Kiewit is under contract through August of next year, so we are anticipating pulling the trigger on notice to proceed 2 for the actual test pile in the spring.
Because we don't have the data is why they cannot to submit to them?
No. The issue is just the federal process, the consultation between Corps of Engineers and NIMS for the NIMS incidental harassment authorization. Our best case scenario was to have it in time to provide notice to proceed for fall construction. The most likely scenario is the one taking hold, and that is not allowing us time to execute the notice to proceed this season. So we have to analyze whether there's an impact on the overall program schedule here. That's being done now, but we just don't see it, all the chips falling into place for the fall. So that, I think, is essentially that. Oh, let me talk budget real quick. We have, again, attached this to our packet, as well as the cost curves that show the quarterly and cumulative trend on budgets to actuals. We're on and under budget. That's the message here. But I do want to point out, and I think Steve mentioned it earlier, we have lost $3.4 million of funding was reappropriated to support legal services, and now our total funding amount is slightly less at $126.8 million. So that's the footnote at the bottom of the funding table, and it references the assembly resolutions and memorandums that captured that reappropriation. That was 2012 port equity that's been reappropriated. I think that's it.
I think that's it. That might be it. Really be it.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's really it.
Questions?
Well, I have one for you, Todd.
Okay.
So as I'm reading this, and I'll start with just saying that this is probably one of the most complicated projects going on in the municipality right now, and I think you guys are really doing a great job. The way you express to us, I mean, and the way you're analyzing everything, especially when it comes to permitting, it's been one of the things that I hear the most.
It's that and funding are two primary constraints.
Sure. So that's where I was going. My first question, and this will be an easy one for you. I know you list there's no issues, but a project this size, I don't want to say I don't believe you, but
right.
Nothing that's like a red flag, this is bad, but what is on your horizon that you're paying attention
The
to?
permitting, and that's why I mentioned it, it's not a known issue because we haven't gone through the schedule and risk analysis. There is an upside to actually doing the pile test in the spring. And that's the incidence of belugas are by far the data shows less in the spring. So our chances of exceeding our incidental harassment authorization and having a shutdown are less in the spring. So that's a higher risk for fall work, and ultimately you could end up having a contractor, mobilized to work, being shut down, and then incurring a cost on that contract. So we were able to mitigate, to the greatest extent possible, the potential for a change condition on the Hewitt contract by structuring the invitation of bid we had an option to execute in the fall. It happened to be actually much more expensive than execution in the spring. We're looking at about a $1.2 million delta to execute in the spring versus the fall. So that cost savings essentially does go toward potentially offsetting a program shift, because the information we need from that test pile program could delay the timeline of design and ultimately construction long term. So, it's juggling.
Does that throw us off 6 months or a year?
We're looking at that now that we've kind of established the given. We're able to analyze that moving forward here, and perhaps by our next update we'll have some better quantification of this. That's why I haven't advertised as an issue, because I can't quantify it, but it is a potential issue. And so I did want to mention it, that it's brand new information. We're kind of just drilling in on that. Yeah. I don't go, because every time I do it, then
Well, yeah,
I know.
Yeah, it's 50. Right now, it's a 50-50.
We learned what overpromising
does
for you.
Yeah. So
that's okay.
we're planning for expect the best, plan for the worst. We really are trying to hold that mantra here.
You may have a political future. Okay. My second question is regarding funding. So a while back we had a discussion about you guys were analyzing different options for funding going forward. Has there been any resolution, or are you getting further on a path of planning plan?
Yeah, well, I can tell you we have not had any conversations in the weeds yet with the new administration, but I do know that the mayor wants to be intimately involved with this, and he's got some ideas of his own that he's kind of expressed in theory about what do you think about trying this? I mean, we're at that point where.
Well, I know, as an assembly member, we had the discussion about, potentially some sort of private partnership.
Yeah.
We also talked about potentially using some opportunity for a revenue bond.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, I understand the administration, it has their job to do, so do we. So my question is, has the Port Commission, have you guys in your finance team started analyzing that? I had heard before you had.
I don't think we could do it.
I don't think we had to the level of detail that would make you comfortable that we can have a conversation.
Okay.
But we're certainly going to. Because I know this is it's going to present itself again. We're not going to be we're going to be as successful as we were this year with the legislature next year, and probably the year after that, and probably the year after that.
Well, that's why I said you might run into a brick wall and say, no, we absolutely can't do this. That's off the table. But we need to start taking those things off the table so we can hone into what we need to do in order to make sure there's financing to finish this project.
Agree.
So as long as you guys, and it's something I can tell you every single meeting, I'm going to ask you every single meeting that same question, because it's something we can't, we have to have a firm plan. And I just want to know, the avenues you're looking at. That way we can help.
Sure, appreciate that.
Well,
we will.
Spending more money on the lawsuit hurts, because that means we have less in the short term to do what we got to do.
Unless you get the
not getting the process started soon enough, or bringing in staff and issues that can't do the work in this period of time. That potentially puts it off and putting off, and then we look at additional files, and we need to find some solutions on it.
Yeah.
Hoping you work very closely with the administration.
But we left a slide out of the briefing, but I think you all have seen it. It was the one that talked about what the phases of the project were, how much was required, and how much we could get done with the $126 million we have now. So, just the recap is we can go about 3 years with what it is we have now and buy ourselves enough time to build a solid plan before we actually have to commit to a path. So that's what we're doing. We're going to start moving down that and start chipping away big time at that to accomplish some things down there. You know, part of the hope is that that we have some successes to finally show the legislature, and they can help us, you know, get the ball rolling on a couple of the bigger steps. You know, the lion's share of it is the dock replacement, and that's one of those things you just don't begin until you have the funds you need to finish it. But we can get right up to that point, almost, with what it is we have now and maybe a little bit of help. But we should lay that all out for you better.
Our current funding allows us to get through step 1 on that graphic.
I remember exactly what you're talking about. That's why, like I said, I don't want to hit that 3-year mark or that 2.5-year mark.
Now what?
Now what?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Neither do we.
To me, a project this size and the magnitude of the cost that we're talking about, we need to start understanding in the next 18 months exactly how we're going to finish it.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you guys very much.
You're welcome. How do I do this?
The good news is I don't have a PowerPoint.
You got all the rest of the time.
Unfortunately, you're going to have to look at me for that period of time.
I do, for the record, want to say that we are on overtime, and we're going to extend this 20 minutes.
We should be able to get to this relatively quickly.
Don't rush it. If we need to have, this is another one of those critical projects going on.
Well, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a regulatory overview. I'm going to talk about the financials, and then I'm going to give Eugene and Bart a chance to go through the project. Do we want to wait for Jennifer to come back?
No. Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. Probably the biggest thing for MLMP is going to be that next week we will get a decision from the Regulatory Commission on the rate case that we filed. And we are hopeful that it will come in our favor. We believe that during the hearing that we addressed all of the issues that were there. We don't know that the interveners were quite as effective as they could have been, and as such we believe that we'll get close to what we had asked for. The second regulatory issue is that the legislature had tasked the Regulatory Commission with putting together a report on efficient and effective use of the transmission system in Alaska, well, at least in the rail belt. That report was due on June 30, or July 1, one of those two dates, and they sent that report to the legislature, and it had basically 5 recommendations. It was not a very lengthy report, it's 6 pages, and we can provide that to you so that you can review that. The 5 recommendations were that an independent transmission company be established to operate the rail belt transmission. They didn't necessarily say what it should look like, how it should be developed, but that it should be put in place. The second was that the rail belt utilities should come up with a plan to do economic dispatch, whether that is starting with a loose power pool so that it's more on a voluntary basis, and then move over time, and they anticipate that over time is somewhere between 5 and 10 years to get to a tight power pool or an independent system operator that would basically tell everybody which units to run and when to run them in order to achieve the lowest cost power for everybody. The third issue ties into the first two, and they recognize that although the utilities in their mind have not done a very good job of working together, that they would like to start out with their recommendations being voluntary and see if the utilities can in fact get to a joint place where everybody can work together and they work it all out. They recognize the fact that if that doesn't happen, then they will look to make it a more mandatory approach and put in place requirements that forces everybody to work together. Along those lines, reporting requirements. They have a timeline that they've set up where reports are going to be required. If those deadlines are missed, they will take that to mean that we're not working together voluntarily, and they'll move towards making it more mandatory. The last one, which is something that everybody ends up seeing, is they don't believe they have enough staff, and they believe they need more money to make all of these things work. And so that was their last recommendation to the legislature is that they give them more staff, more money to make these things work, and in some cases some additional authority. Now, to the first one, MLMP has been working with, as part of a working group with most of the other rail belt utilities, and all but one of them at this juncture has signed on to the process. We believe that the 5 generating utilities will sign on relatively soon, with a company from outside of Alaska, the American Transmission Company. As part of that working group, we're working to try and solve the independent transmission system, to make the transmission system work as efficiently and effectively as possible. All of the utility assets would be moved to the transmission company, and that may be through actual transfer of the assets or a long-term lease of those assets to allow the transmission company to have control over those assets. So we believe that we are making progress. It's covered under a non-disclosure agreement, so we can't disclose what that progress is, but we hope to very soon, within the next week or so, be able to put out a press release with everybody having given their permission to do so, to talk about some of the progress that's being made.
Can you disclose who the one entity is that hasn't signed on to be part of the group? I bet I can guess, but But can you disclose that?
We cannot, because the those that have signed on did so through an agreement which has a confidentiality agreement related to it. I can tell you that it's somewhere between Fairbanks and Homer.
I'm sure I know.
You probably do. The other 2 cases that are coming up soon, I believe they begin in August, would be the NSTAR case, and we are participating as part of that. With the current proposed rates, our cost of fuel transportation would go up by $1 million+ a year, which of course is then passed on to our ratepayers. And so we are going to work as diligently as possible to keep those costs down to our ratepayers. We will be participating in a mediation session soon with all of the parties to see if we're able to come to an agreement. And of course, if we are able to solve it and settle that without having to go to hearing, it saves a significant amount of money for everybody.
Do you have multiple providers that you're negotiating with, or is it the one?
It's the one. Basically, NSTAR owns the system that we move most of the gas that we use on. And so it's NSTAR on one side, and it's the utilities and other users of that gas system on the other side. The second one is the CINGSA, the Cook Inlet Natural Gas Storage, whatever the A stands for, I think is Alaska. But they had the good fortune to find about 4 billion cubic feet of gas that they didn't realize was there. They have proposed to sell that gas because they believe they own it. We, as one of the customers, don't feel the same way. And so that will be a case that is litigated before the RCA in August.
So we're actually spending legal funding for that case, right? Are we spending money on that?
We are, but it's
outside council or in-house?
it is through the contract that we have with Kimball Huffman, which is our regulatory counsel. It's at this point a relatively small amount of money. Now, if it goes to hearing, then of course it would be more.
And just for the record, we never paid for injection of gas into CINSA as far as putting the base gas allocation that they need to pressurize the storage. Is that correct?
We, Anna Henderson is the head of our regulatory area, and she can probably address that because she's the one who's going to get to testify in that case.
And that's a difficult question to answer at this point because we're still in the 5-year inception phase for rates. So the rates were initially based on budget. They're supposed to true them up. So depending on qualifiers and what you mean by paid for and things like that. No, we haven't directly.
We weren't directly involved or in the cost of the injection of gas with pressurizing.
There is some component of that charge in our rates, yes.
And the last one, of course, and probably the largest one, is that 2015 we anticipate will be the test year for our next rate case. And that rate case will be filed sometime in 2016. And as a result of that, the rates will possibly go into effect in the November timeframe of 2016, which will include the costs related to our Plant 2A. So that's the regulatory piece of it. If you have any other questions, I would be happy to try and address them. If not, we can talk about the financial, the one sheet that I gave you with the financial information on it. We'll talk about that first band, and that is a comparison of our expenditures in the actual column to the first quarter budget revision for our 2015 budget. So that's as it was revised. And then in the third column on the far right there, it shows the percentage of our expenditures to date through the end of May of the total budget. So if you looked at it in terms of the fact that we are 5/12 through the year, we should have spent about 42% of our budget. And in the corresponding piece of that, of course, is with the operating revenue, we should have collected about 42% of our budget. As you can see, we are behind in the revenue that we anticipated that we would generate. We are pretty close to that of the operating expense amount. Our non-operating expenses are slightly over. That's driven by AFUDC, the allowance for funds used during construction, the interest that we capitalize as a result of projects like the power plant and other capital projects. What that does is it ends up being a negative expense, so it offsets the expense because the interest that we would normally pay gets taken out and gets capitalized into the cost of the project. We had initially anticipated that our AFUDC rate would be higher than it is, and in fact in 2015 we anticipated it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.25% based on our commercial paper program. It's actually 0.4%. And so in the budget it's in there at 2.25%. We're actually transferring it out at 0.4%. If you look at the second set of numbers there, that is the comparison of, it's a pro forma that takes the 2015 revised budget and compares it to a pro forma. So we took the 5 months of actuals and then projected out the remaining 7 months, and that shows where we anticipate that we're going to be. Again, the revenues are below what we had expected. One of the drivers on that is that we had put into our other revenue about $13 million in sales of electricity to MEA, and those sales didn't materialize because they decided to sign a contract with Chugach instead of MLMP. As a result, we've got about $13 million built into the budget in revenue that we know we will not collect as we go through the year. The operating expenses are going to end up pretty close to 100%. The non-operating is about 13% over, and again, that goes back to AFUDC because we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about $5.5 million in AFUDC built in, and we're going to probably end up with maybe $2 million. The last is a comparison of what our 2015 revised budget is and our draft at this point, and we're still working on it, 2016 budget, and it shows those comparisons. What we do know is in 2015 that we are going to have to tighten our belt a little bit. We're going to be looking at the operating expenses for the remainder of the year. We're also going to look at capital projects that we have on the books for this year that can be pushed into later years. Because Plant 2A is obviously an expensive project for us, and it is using up almost all of the bond funding that we have available to us, we have to fund all the other capital projects through operating cash. We have to generate the cash in order to do that. As you can see, our net income we anticipate is not going to be what we thought it was. So we have to look at our capital projects, find the ones that are most important, prioritize those, and make some decisions as to projects that we can either cut or delay in order to be able to fund all the projects and stay within our means. So those are the financials as they are. As Brett mentioned, transfer payments continue to be an issue for us as well. Our IGCs will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million for this year. Our MUSA will be about $7.5 million. And our dividend is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 to $8 million. What that does is it puts additional pressure, because what you see in the numbers there for net income don't take into account the dividend coming out. And you can look at it that if you actually consider that as an expense, we will be sending more money downtown than we make, which of course is a problem because that eats into our equity. Jennifer had asked about our debt to equity, or well, about AWU's debt to equity. Ours at the end of 14 was about 60% debt, 40% equity. We actually believe that 15, our equity will drop a little bit, but it'll stay fairly constant, probably somewhere in the 39-38% range. When we put in 16 our new plant in place, and as a result of that, we capitalized that short-term borrowing into a long-term borrowing situation, our equity is expected to drop significantly. And what we believe is that if we are not able to generate enough internal cash to build equity back up, it's not going to move from the lower number going forward. So that's the financial and regulatory, so that's the rosy part of the presentation. And now I will turn it over to Eugene to talk about the plant, and if you have any questions, we can cover those after.
Well, that was the rosy part. He's kind of scared.
I'm glad Mr. Rover's here to hear this discussion.
Thank you. Some of the members, I'm going to step through a presentation packet that I normally give in writing fairly quickly so we can get out of here. Project background, the contracts have not changed. Substantial completion remains June of 2016 with final completion September of 2016. Section 2, safety. One of you in months past had asked for us to report on safety stats. We're pleased to report that both the incident rate and the lost time incident injury rate is below national and state rates for projects of this size, heavy industrial. So that's very good and a high point for our contractor out there. They're bringing a mentality from the North Slope that is good and well received by the local workforce. Stepping through the work in progress, it's been since April, I think we met here last, and there's been significant work completed out on site. Mainly throughout the winter was working inside the building, underground drains, electrical, and foundations. I'm happy to report those are all complete. All the concrete is placed inside the building, and significant underground infrastructure is in place. Now, major components, the Lego pieces of the power plant have also been placed on foundations in the building. About 80% of those are complete. The biggest ones are the steam turbine and steam turbine generator. Those were heavy lifted by an outside outfit in May successfully, and we have since closed up the southwest corner of the building that you can see from the glen. Inside the building, bridge cranes are in place, above ground infrastructure, pipe racks, and now piping, both regular pressure and high energy piping, are being loaded by pipe fitters. And there is a lot of it. I had a stat, but I don't want to misspeak. Many miles of pipe to go into this facility. In the admin portion of the building, subcontractor continues to outfit the administrative facilities, of which the first floor is where the majority of electrical equipment is. That equipment is now placed. And they are beginning to put the other electrical facility infrastructure in place so that it can start pulling cables. And there's many, many miles of cables to be pulled this summer and fall. Roof is complete. been bought off, and roof pavers shall be going on that membrane parapet roof here pretty soon. The plant is in a high wind, hillside wind loading area, and have to have the weight of those roof pavers to keep the membrane down. This contractor, Quanta, has had great weather throughout the winter and into the spring, and it's continuing into the summer, and they're finally starting to be able to leverage it in terms of opening up multiple outside fronts. And that is important to navigate to the finish line on schedule for these folks. That includes the high voltage underground from the power block towards the MLP switchyard to the west, and the GSU big giant transformer foundations and associated blast walls. These blast walls are quite large, fire code dictated. They're going up now against the west side of the power block building. On the north side, Hickel, major subcontractor, is working the deep piping, large bore piping to the cooling tower, which will offload heat to the cooling tower, or to AWW's heat recovery or energy recovery station upgrade. So we have 25-foot deep excavations right now as we load these large 3-foot diameter pipes towards AWW's ERS, with the intention of marrying up with them in the next month or so in their project. And underground fire, electrical duct bank, and outside foundations for various outside stuff continues on the north side of the plant. On the far west side, the second biggest building called GIS, which is a fancy switched building for the high voltage before it connects to the MLB switchyard, is going in and is projected to continue into this fall. All the major equipment is in town. A lot of it is still off site, except the final large piece of equipment that hasn't showed up is the gas compressors. Those are scheduled to show up in September sometime. So the risk of all this dozens of millions of dollars of equipment not showing up or having force majeure somewhere in the world or whatever is almost off the table, so that's good. And as such, we had our all builders risk underwriter Indian Harbor here this week kicking the tires, and they left very pleased with what they were seeing. Peaking about 150 men and women working on site in about 3.5 acres and not going to blows is an impressive feat, and working safely is even more impressive. So we remain on schedule and under budget. Last time I spoke with Mr. Steele, he didn't believe me, but I'm telling you we are. We intend to come in. We intend to come in under budget, not necessarily due to the activities in the field, but we do feel like we're managing our contract with Quanta well. But the majority of that is the lower than anticipated financing rate that Marcus spoke to earlier. And at this point, I'll give it to Bart to speak to the project finances and change orders, if that's all right.
Sure, you want to ask me some more questions?
Oh, I was going to make a smart
Just to quickly go through where we're at and bring you up to date. It's been a couple months. Scope changes under item 5 here. We have just executed change order. It's in signature process right now. Change order 7. That is to complete the build outs for the basement dispatch center, which is there is a basement component of this, and it also is going to pay for a sewer line extension that was not included in the contract. It's about a 220-foot run south at the west end of Plant 2 that we have to bring both Plant 2 and Plant 2A together, bring them into a vault, have a partial flume, metering, and some other activities that AVU requested of us. So that is coming through on that change order. That is going to be $613,000. We are still, to finish out the full dispatch functionality, we are still waiting for final estimates for the battery room and UPS. We expect that to be close to $300,000. And then We did de-scope a portion of work, and that is the actual dispatch consoles and video walls and furniture that was associated with relocation of the dispatch function. We recently heard from our IT, engineering, and SCADA folks, and they said it's going to be very difficult for them to be prepared and ready to go under a new platform by the time that plant is ready. So they were concerned about us buying hardware and software and then having it age in place and get out of warranty. So they requested that we not do that portion of the electronics, so to speak, at this time. Wait until they have their databases and GIS and everything up and operating, and then buy the video walls and the hardware and software at that time, which will be the latest version, so that we don't have that aging in place. That component is a $735,000 estimate. So we spoke that with Mr. Johnson. He agreed that that was probably a better plan, to wait until we actually have systems up, ready to go, and then buy the latest hardware and software to back it up.
Do the scheduled dates for all this to happen, both yours and the financial system folks, do they marry up so that there's enough time to get what you need online? I mean, come online on time?
Their best estimate is that it's going to take them 2 years to fully integrate the GIS, the database, and SCADA systems. We are 1 year away from flipping the switch.
Therefore,
so that would look like we would be at least a year before they would be ready to put that into production. So by that time, if we bought today, put it in place, that equipment would be at least 2.5 years old by the time they were ready to bring it up. It'd be a year past our completion date.
now you can bring the plant online without that new,
Correct.
without the new,
Totally.
by using the other shipbuilding.
Existing. Okay, so that gets us through our current change orders that we have in progress. Now, just to recap, we have done change orders 1 through 6, which are detailed on the next page, which I believe you probably have seen these before. And now I will step through the budget sheet with you. Been several changes on this. Everything on the left-hand side is our current contracts and our commitments under the dollars of those contracts. Those have not changed to date from what you have seen previously. The blue column is our projected column. We have went over this with you before. We scrubbed the contracts at about 50% of the entire project. These were the projections then. We're sticking with these projections for the time being. And what has changed are the actual incurred. All of Quanta, GE, IEC, the building risk, AFUDC, and A&G are all through May. So these numbers are good through payments through May. And then the last two items, the other expenses and infrastructure projects, those are pretty much current, right up to date out of the system. So we are currently looking at $193 million currently incurred. We have about $114 million to go. That's about 62% of what our project expense is expected. We are about 56 to 58% complete on the construction side. So our money is still a little bit ahead of the construction. That's primarily due to Mobeam pre-funding the bond costs and other activities that typically go on with the contracts. Subtotal basis, we are currently committed at 308. We're still projecting somewhere between 298 and 300 million when this project is over with. As we drop down into our contingency and change order authority, we originally had the 9.9 million pre-approved by the Assembly. We have executed, although that says 845 there, it's actually 1.1. If you look down in the change order column, one of those change orders was the 1-year extension on the plant warranty. So that was actually pre-approved, so we deducted it out of an actual change order, but it is included in the Quanta Power overall contract, just so you're not misguided there. So with the $613,000 change order 7, which that has not been executed yet, we will be right at $1.7 million on the project. We still have some elements and items, and there's been some more recent activities that have been looked at, and those are actually, most of those are already on this sheet, I believe, or are they not? Yeah, we talked about the battery room, and then we also have the fire loop extension where we're looping in plant 2 to plant 2A so we can backfeed water and also keep our pressure up at plant 2 without having to repump. Today was dropping their water pressure up at plant 2, so we're looping it back into plant 2A so it'll boost the fire pressure on that loop without us going into a huge capital cost. So those are hanging out there. We also have a couple other electrical elements that have been discovered recently, and we're researching that currently, and I don't really have any estimates for. So on a total project budget basis, we're still at $314 million. We're still looking at about $300 million, and so far everything is looking fairly well. Is there any questions on that? An answer for you? Okay.
So you're still saying about 14 million in savings so far?
Primarily that's going to be to the AFUDC. If you look at the AFUDC numbers, there's an $8 million delta there. And there'll be some other savings as we go forward. We haven't netted out either the GE or Quanta contract. We still have about $5 million in spare parts and equipment that will not be executed there, but we have not reduced those contracts yet. Those guys always want to move up. We don't want to talk about moving down, but we'll get them there.
That's why you're there for part. That's why you're there, is to move them down.
So that's basically where it'll come up to the $15 million at the end of the day. Next couple pages. Any other questions? Go for it. Okay, the next one is the Quanta 30-month proposed payment. This is their original projections on a 30-month schedule. As you can see, there was a time period when their prior management was going to try to get it 24 months. That management group has gone away. We have a new management group. Their new estimate is actually early May of 2016, so they're still ahead of schedule, but that margin went down, which is what we kind of expected all along. They are tracking pretty much to their original 30-month schedule. The only thing I will tell you on this chart, and we're not going to change it, but unless they give us official notification, but their June, July, August through November numbers look high to us. We think that that's going to get leveled off from where we are here at May, and we'll see that $5 to $7 million go all the way out to June of next year, rather than seeing these steep spikes and coming back down. It's going to just level out there. That's our projection. The next chart is the project cumulative. As you can see, we're from a total project basis of $314 million. We are still tracking below. Part of that is we're about 45 days behind in the payment cycles, and the other part is that we still have that $15 million buffer that we think we're going to be at overall on the project. So we're tracking pretty constant all the way across right now. That's looking pretty good. And I think that's it for me. Questions?
Again, this is all three departments. When we start talking today between ALU and MLNP and support, you guys have some major issues and projects that you're dealing with, and You know, I know that we've had some rocky patches in the beginning, but I think this overall has been a very well managed project, not only from the engineering standpoint and all that Eugene you have to deal with, but from the financial standpoint, Bart. And I just want to say, you know, I wish every project, you know, could be this. You guys got lucky with the weather. I know that. You got lucky with some of the financing. You know those benefits, but it takes experienced people to be able to capitalize on those. And I just want to say thank you.
I would have to say, I mean, I just get to dance between them, but the Griff Roush, the construction project manager, has done an excellent job and is very knowledgeable.
Oh, there's no doubt. You can tell that by talking to him for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There are others who can use that for keep writing, so don't go over the law.
Yes, you're going to have to squeeze that out of the bond.
I was going to say, don't. MLMP has our mayors.
Any other questions, comments? Questions, comments from the gallery? Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks everybody for coming. You did a good job. We raised all kinds of questions now. Need to call you on the phone. Thank you, guys.